The ceiling had 47 cracks in it. Naruto knew this because he'd counted them twice already, lying flat on his back with the covers kicked to the floor and the window propped open to let in air that wasn't any cooler than the air already inside. Summer in Konoha was thick and stupid. The kind of heat that sat on your chest like a fat cat and refused to move. His apartment didn't have air conditioning. The landlord had promised to fix it back in April and then stopped returning his waves in the hallway. So Naruto had made peace with the sweat pooling in the hollow of his throat and the way his t-shirt stuck to his ribs like a second skin. 47 cracks. He'd named a few of them. The long, jagged one near the light fixture was the river. The cluster by the far corner looked like a spider web, so that was grandma. No particular reason. It just felt like a grandma shape. He turned his head and looked at the clock on his nightstand. The glowing numbers read 1:47 a.m. Sleep wasn't coming. It hadn't come at a reasonable hour in weeks, not since the academy had let out for the short summer break, and the days had become long, formless things with no structure and no one to talk to. During the school year, at least, there was routine. Wake up, eat whatever was in the cabinet, go to class, get yelled at by Uruka, try to make someone laugh at lunch, walk home alone, eat whatever was in the cabinet, sleep. Repeat. The loneliness was still there, but it had a schedule, and somehow that made it manageable. Summer break removed the schedule, and without it, the loneliness just sort of expanded to fill whatever space was available. Naruto sat up, rubbed his eyes with the heels of his palms, and swung his legs over the side of the bed. The floorboards were warm under his bare feet. He pulled on his sandals, his orange pants, and a black t-shirt he'd fished from the laundry pile. It passed the sniff test. Barely. He was going out. There was no particular reason. There never was on nights like this. He just couldn't stay in the apartment anymore. The walls had a way of getting closer around 2 in the morning, and the quiet had a specific texture, heavy, woolly, pressing against his eardrums until he could hear his own heartbeat and nothing else. Going outside wouldn't fix anything, but at least the quiet was a different kind of quiet. Open-air quiet, street quiet. The kind that had cricket sounds in it and the distant murmur of the river and the occasional bark of a dog somewhere. He locked his door. Not that anyone was going to break in. There was nothing worth stealing unless someone had a burning need for instant ramen and a chipped kunai, and dropped down the exterior stairs 2 at a time. Konoha at 2 in the morning was a ghost town. The main streets were empty, the shops shuttered with their awnings rolled up. Paper lanterns hung dark outside restaurants that wouldn't open for another 6 hours. The only light came from the street lamps spaced along the main road, throwing pools of yellowish glow onto the packed earth. Naruto walked through them one at a time, stepping from light to shadow to light like crossing stones in a river. He passed the Yamanaka flower shop. Closed. The smell of cut stems and soil seeped out from under the door. He passed Ikaraku Ramen. Closed, obviously, which was a tragedy bordering on a crime, and let his fingers trail along the wooden counter as he walked by. He passed the bookstore where Uruka-sensei sometimes browsed on weekends, and the weapons shop where the girl behind the counter always gave him a look like he'd walked in with dog shit on his sandals. Nobody was out. Nobody was ever out this late. That was sort of the point. During the day, the streets were a minefield of those looks, the cold ones, the suspicious ones, the ones that said, "I know what you are even if you don't." At night, the streets belonged to him. He could walk anywhere, touch anything, exist without being a problem for someone. He turned south without thinking about it, heading toward the river. The Knocker River cut through the eastern part of the village and bent south near the Uchiha compound. And there was a spot under the bridge where the bank was flat and grassy. And you could sit and throw stones at the water and pretend you were a normal kid doing normal things at a normal hour. The streets narrowed as he moved into the older part of the village, residential blocks, low-slung buildings with tile roofs, alleyways that branched off the main road like veins from an artery. It was darker here. Fewer street lamps. The buildings leaned closer together, and the shadows between them were thick enough to touch. Naruto was halfway down a side street that ran parallel to the eastern wall of the Uchiha district when he heard voices. He stopped. Not the distant murmur of someone talking in their sleep through an open window. Not a couple arguing behind closed doors. These voices were close, hushed, and coming from the alley to his left. A narrow gap between a tea house and a storage building that he'd passed 100 times without ever looking twice at. Instinct, the sharp, feral kind that came from growing up alone in a village that didn't want you, made him flatten against the wall before his brain caught up to what his body was doing. He pressed his back to the rough plaster and held his breath. His heart was doing something fast and uncomfortable in his chest. The voices resolved into two distinct tones. One was low, clipped, almost mechanical, the kind of voice that had been trained to not carry. The other was a woman's, soft but firm, controlled, each word placed precisely. "The timeline has moved up," the woman was saying. "The elders met 3 days ago at Naka Shrine. Fugaku tried to delay, but they overruled him." "How far up?" "Weeks, not months. They're talking about the festival, using the crowds as cover for initial positioning." A pause. Then the clipped voice. "The Hokage needs specifics, troop strength. Who's committed and who's wavering?" "I've compiled what I can. The main families are aligned, Tekka, Yashiro, Inabai, they're all in. The younger generation is split. Some are eager, some are terrified. Most will follow orders when the time comes because that's what Uchiha do." "And Fugaku?" Another pause, longer this time. When the woman spoke again, something had shifted in her voice, a hairline fracture in the control. "My husband believes he's protecting his family." "He's wrong, but he believes it with everything he has. He won't back down." Naruto barely breathed. He didn't understand half of what he was hearing, elders, timelines, troop strength, but he understood tone. He'd spent his whole life reading tone because tone was how you survived. Uruka's tone when he was genuinely angry versus when he was just performing it. The Hokage's tone when he was actually listening versus when he was waiting for Naruto to finish talking. The shopkeeper's tone when they said, "We're closed," and meant, "not to you." The tone in this alley was dangerous. Both voices carried the weight of something huge and terrible being discussed with surgical calm. He should leave. He knew he should leave. Every survival instinct he'd developed over 12 years of being the village pariah was screaming at him to turn around. Walk away. Go home. Go to bed. Forget this ever happened. Instead, Naruto tilted his head and peered around the corner. The alley was barely 4 feet wide, cluttered with old crates and a rusted rain barrel. 2 figures stood in the deepest part of the shadow, nearly invisible. One was in full Anbu gear, the porcelain mask, the gray armor, the tanto strapped across the back. Naruto had seen Anbu before, perched on rooftops or flickering through the streets on whatever grim errands Anbu ran. They scared him in a distant, abstract way, like thunderstorms or the deep end of the public pool. The other figure was a woman. Tall, slender, with long dark hair pulled back in a loose tie. She wore a simple navy yukata, the kind you'd throw on to take the trash out or answer the door late at night. Nothing about her appearance suggested anything extraordinary. She looked like someone's mom. Someone who'd be at the market in the morning squeezing tomatoes and chatting with the other women in the produce section. She was handing the Anbu operative a small scroll. The exchange was practiced, efficient, her hand extended, his closed around the scroll. Both withdrew. It took less than 2 seconds. "Next contact?" the Anbu asked. "Same schedule, 3rd and 7th day. I'll use the secondary drop if the compound goes to lockdown." "Understood." The Anbu shifted, body language changing to departure mode, and then stopped. "Mikoto-san." "The Hokage wanted me to convey, he understands the risk you're taking. He's grateful." The woman, Mikoto, made a sound that might have been a laugh in a different life. "Tell the Hokage that his gratitude means less than his action. I need to know that what I'm giving him is being used, not filed. If this information sits in a drawer while my family," she stopped herself, drew a breath. "Tell him I need to see movement toward a real solution, not more meetings, not more deliberation. I can't do this forever." "I'll convey it." And then the Anbu was gone. Not walked away, not faded, gone, in that instantaneous way that high-level shinobi moved when they weren't pretending to be normal. One moment there, the next, empty air and the faint displacement of wind. The woman, Mikoto, stood alone in the alley. She didn't move immediately. Her shoulders dropped an inch. Her hand came up to press against her forehead, and she stood like that for several seconds, eyes closed, breathing in slow, measured counts like she was trying to hold herself together through force of will alone. Then she turned to leave. And looked directly at Naruto. He'd pulled his head back the instant the Anbu vanished, but not fast enough. Not nearly fast enough. He was a 12-year-old kid in an orange outfit lurking on a street corner at 2 in the morning. Stealth was not, had never been, and would possibly never be his strong suit. Their eyes met. The woman's were dark, so dark they were almost black, and they widened in a way that hit Naruto like a physical blow, not with anger but with fear. Pure, undiluted, bone-deep fear. He'd never seen an adult look at him with that expression before. He'd seen hatred, contempt, pity, and indifference. Never fear. For one frozen second, neither of them moved. Then Naruto did the dumbest possible thing he could have done, which was also somehow the most honest. He said, hi. Mikoto Uchiha moved faster than he could track. One moment, she was 15 feet away in the mouth of the alley. The next, she was right in front of him, her hand closing around his wrist with a grip that was firm without being painful. Her other hand pressing flat against his chest and pushing him back against the wall. Her face was inches from his. Up close, she smelled like jasmine tea, and something sharper underneath, metallic, adrenaline, maybe, or fear turned chemical. How long? Her voice was barely a whisper. How long have you been standing there? I was just walking. How long? I don't know, a couple minutes. I heard voices and He was stammering, his tongue thick and clumsy, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his wrists where her fingers pressed. I wasn't trying to spy or anything. I was just out walking because I couldn't sleep and... What did you hear? Nothing. I heard you talking to that Anbu guy, but I don't even know what any of it. Mikoto's eyes closed. Her grip on his wrist tightened for just a moment, then released. She stepped back, putting a foot of space between them, and Naruto saw her hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against her thighs to still them. She looked at him, really looked, not the quick dismissive glance most adults gave him, and he watched something move behind her eyes. Recognition. Not the hostile kind, not the it's the fox brat kind, but something else. She was seeing him, calculating, processing. You're the Uzumaki boy, she said. Not a question. Naruto. He didn't know why he core more actions network error right the next chapter now. Chapter 2. Behind the fan, the Uchiha compound announced itself before you ever reached the gate. It wasn't anything dramatic, no killing intent leaking through the walls, no ominous soundtrack kicking in. It was subtler than that. The streets approaching the district were just emptier, cleaner. The buildings on the perimeter blocks had fewer window boxes and less laundry hanging from balconies, like the civilian families who lived nearby had unconsciously pulled themselves inward, away from the boundary. The walls themselves were tall, slate gray, topped with ornamental tile that looked decorative but was angled in a way that would make climbing difficult. The Uchiha fan was emblazoned on the main gate in red and white, freshly painted, almost defiant. Naruto stood in front of that gate on a Tuesday afternoon, 5 days after the alley, and seriously questioned every life choice that had led him to this moment. The invitation, if you could call it that, had been straightforward. After their conversation in the dark, after Mikoto had extracted his promise and he'd extracted hers, she'd said, "Come to dinner. This Thursday, the main house, anyone can direct you, come at 6. He hadn't come on Thursday. He'd chickened out, spent the evening on his apartment floor eating cold ramen from the cup and telling himself it was probably a trap. She was going to lure him inside and make him disappear. Or it was a test. Or she'd changed her mind and he'd show up, and she'd pretend she didn't know him, and he'd be standing on the Uchiha doorstep like an idiot while everyone stared. But then Friday passed, and Saturday and Sunday, and the loneliness crept back in the way it always did. That heavy, formless pressure that was worst in the evenings when the light went golden and slanted, and he could see families through windows, sitting down to meals together. And he thought about the way Mikoto's voice had sounded when she'd said, "I know what it's like to carry something alone." And he thought about the way she'd looked at him like he was a person and not a problem. So here he was. Tuesday instead of Thursday. 5 days late and standing at the gate like a kid about to knock on the door of a haunted house on a dare. "You gonna stand there all day or what?" Naruto flinched. A boy about his age was leaning against the inside of the gate, arms crossed, expression bored. He had the standard issue Uchiha look, dark hair, dark eyes, sharp features, and wore a high-collared blue shirt with the clan symbol on the back. It took Naruto a second to place him, and then his stomach did something complicated. Sasuke Uchiha, they knew each other. Of course they knew each other. They'd been in the same academy class for years. But knew was generous. They existed in each other's peripheral vision. Naruto was loud, disruptive, and at the bottom of every ranking. Sasuke was quiet, talented, and at the top. They'd sparred a few times in class, and Sasuke had won every bout with the kind of efficient, dispassionate skill that made Naruto want to punch something and also, confusingly, try harder. They weren't friends, they weren't enemies, they were just aware of each other. I'm coming in," Naruto said, and immediately hated how uncertain he sounded. Sasuke's eyebrow went up. "Why?" "Your mom invited me for dinner." Both eyebrows now. Sasuke pushed off the wall and looked at Naruto with the expression of someone who'd just been told the sky was green and expected to take it seriously. "My mom invited you for dinner." "Yeah. You, Naruto Uzumaki, the kid who set the classroom curtains on fire last month." "That was an accident, and Uruka-sensei already." "My mom invited you." "That's what I said. Are you gonna let me in, or are we just gonna stand here repeating stuff?" Sasuke stared at him for another 3 seconds, then shrugged with the elaborate indifference of a 12-year-old who wanted you to know he didn't care. "Whatever, follow me, and don't touch anything." The compound was bigger than Naruto expected. From outside, the walls made it seem contained, compact. Inside, it opened up into what was essentially a small village within the village. Streets and houses and shops and training grounds, all organized with a geometric precision that felt very specifically Uchiha. The houses were traditional, wood and paper and tile, with covered walkways connecting them and small gardens tucked into every available space. It was beautiful, actually. Quiet in a way that was different from the quiet of Naruto's neighborhood. His neighborhood was quiet because no one wanted to be there. This place was quiet because the people in it moved with purpose and spoke in low voices and carried themselves with the particular posture of a clan that knew exactly who it was and where it stood, except something was off. Naruto couldn't name it immediately, but he felt it the way you felt a change in barometric pressure before a storm, not with any specific sense but with all of them at once. The people they passed on the street were tense, not visibly, not in a way a casual observer would notice. But Naruto noticed. A woman hanging laundry paused as they walked by, her eyes tracking them with a focus that went beyond casual curiosity. 2 men standing outside what looked like a meeting hall stopped their conversation mid-sentence when Naruto and Sasuke passed, and didn't resume it until they were well out of earshot. A group of kids playing in a courtyard fell quiet as Naruto walked by, and one of them whispered something to another that made the second kid's eyes go wide. The staring he was used to. The staring happened everywhere. But this felt layered. They were staring at him because he was an outsider in their compound, yes, but there was something else underneath, an ambient tension that had nothing to do with Naruto and everything to do with whatever was happening behind the closed doors of those meeting halls. "Your neighborhood's pretty nice," Naruto said, because he couldn't handle silence. "It's a compound, not a neighborhood. What's the difference?" Sasuke didn't answer. They turned down a wider street lined with cherry trees. Not in bloom this time of year, just green and heavy, and approached a house at the end that was larger than the others, set back from the road with a proper garden and a stone path leading to the front door. The Uchiha fan was carved into the lintel above the entrance. This wasn't just a house, it was the house. The clan head's residence. Naruto's feet slowed involuntarily. This is where you live, obviously. It's huge. It's normal. It is absolutely not normal. My entire apartment could fit in your front yard. Something flickered across Sasuke's face, not quite guilt, not quite discomfort, but a cousin of both. He looked away. Just come inside. They left their sandals at the entrance and stepped into a jenkin that was clean and polished and smelled like cedar. The house opened beyond it into a series of connected rooms separated by sliding doors. The kind of traditional layout where you could see 3 rooms deep if all the doors were open. The floors were smooth wood and tatami, and the walls held a few pieces of calligraphy and a single painted scroll depicting a hawk in flight. "Sasuke, is that you?" The voice came from the back of the house, warm, steady, immediately recognizable. Naruto's pulse kicked up. "Yeah." Sasuke called back. "And, you have a guest." Mikoto Uchiha appeared from what had to be the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She looked completely different from the woman in the alley. That woman had been taut, sharp, vibrating with controlled fear. This woman was soft-tied and smiling, her hair loose around her shoulders, her sleeves pushed up to her elbows. She looked like exactly what she appeared to be, a mother in the middle of cooking dinner. Her eyes found Naruto, and something passed through them, relief, he thought, though it was there and gone so fast he couldn't be sure. "Naruto-kun, I'm glad you came." She said it simply, no mention of the fact that he was 5 days late, no reproach, no awkwardness, just warmth. "Dinner's almost ready. Sasuke, show him where to wash up." "Mom, why is he here?" "Because I invited him. Wash up, both of you." Sasuke opened his mouth to argue, caught something in his mother's expression that changed his mind, and turned on his heel. "Come on," he said to Naruto, in the tone of someone doing a chore. The bathroom was down a side hallway, and Sasuke stood in the doorway with his arms crossed while Naruto washed his hands. The soap was lavender-scented. Naruto's soap at home was a cracked white bar he'd gotten in a 3-pack from the discount shelf. "So how do you know my mom?" Sasuke asked. "I just met her in the village. She was nice to me." "My mom's nice to everyone. That doesn't explain why you're eating dinner at my house." "Maybe she felt sorry for me." Naruto said it lightly, but the truth of it sat in his chest like a stone. Sasuke studied him. For a kid who barely talked at school, he had an intense way of looking at people, focused, analytical, like he was running calculations behind those dark eyes. "You're weird," he finally said. "Thanks. That wasn't a compliment. I'm taking it as one anyway." Dinner was in a room with a low table that could seat 8 but was set for 4. 4. Naruto counted the place settings twice, because the number didn't make sense until it did. Mikoto, Sasuke, Naruto, and the empty 4th that he guessed was for Fugaku or Itachi. The food was already laid out. Grilled fish, rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, and a plate of sliced tomatoes that Sasuke's eyes went to immediately with a hunger that bordered on spiritual. "Itachi's on a mission," Mikoto said, settling at the table across from Naruto. "And your father is at a meeting. It's just us 3 tonight." Something about the way she said meeting carried a weight that Naruto felt, but Sasuke didn't seem to notice. The boy was already eating, chopsticks moving with efficiency. Naruto looked at the food in front of him. He couldn't remember the last time someone had cooked a meal for him. The Hokage took him to Ikaraku sometimes, and Uruka had started doing the same more recently, but those were restaurant meals, someone else cooking for the general public and Naruto happening to be there. This was different. Mikoto had set a place for him at her family table. She'd cooked food that he was meant to eat. The distinction shouldn't have mattered as much as it did, but his throat was doing something tight and inconvenient, and he had to stare hard at the grilled fish until the feeling passed. "Naruto-kun. Eat before it gets cold." He ate. The food was good, really good, the kind of good that made instant ramen feel like the culinary equivalent of giving up on life. The fish was seasoned with something he couldn't identify, savory and slightly sweet, and the rice was the proper sticky kind, not the crunchy undercooked stuff he made at home. "This is amazing," he said, mouth full. "Don't talk with your mouth full," Sasuke said. "Don't tell me what to do." "Both of you manners," Mikoto said, but she was smiling. It was a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made small crinkles at the corners. She looked at Naruto with an expression he couldn't decode, something between fondness and sadness, close to the way she sometimes glanced at Sasuke when the boy wasn't looking. Dinner unfolded in a way that felt almost normal. Almost like a regular meal in a regular family in a regular house. Sasuke complained about a training exercise. Mikoto asked about the academy. Naruto, loosened up by food and the unfamiliar warmth of being included, started talking, and once he started, he was hard to stop. He told them about Uruka-sensei's pop quizzes and Kiba's dog peeing on Shino's backpack, and the time he'd tried to do the clone jutsu and produced something that looked like a melted candle. Sasuke snorted at that last one. Actually snorted, a quick involuntary sound that he immediately tried to cover with a cough. Naruto caught it anyway and grinned at him, and Sasuke scowled back, but there was no real heat in it. "Your clone jutsu," Mikoto said carefully. "You're having trouble with it. It's the worst." Naruto said, deflating, "Everyone else can do it. Sakura can do 3 at once. Even Shikamaru can do it and he sleeps through half the lessons. Mine just come out." He made a vague gesture. "Wrong. Wrong how? Like pale and floppy." "Uruka-sensei says my chakra control is the problem, but I don't really get what that means. He explains it and I nod and then I try again, and the same floppy thing happens." Mikoto set down her chopsticks. "Show me." "What, here?" "Not the jutsu. Show me how you mold chakra." "Just the basic exercise, gathering it in your hands." Naruto hesitated, glanced at Sasuke, who was watching with the poorly concealed interest of someone pretending not to care. Then he held his hands in front of him and concentrated. This part, at least, he could do. He felt the energy stir in his center, that warm, rushing feeling like standing in a river current, and he pushed it outward toward his palms. His hands glowed blue. Way too blue. The chakra that gathered wasn't the controlled shimmer he'd seen other students produce. It was a roiling, visible mass, spilling over his fingers like water from an overfilled cup. Unstable, volatile, and wildly excessive. Mikoto's eyes widened. Just slightly, but Naruto caught it. I know, he muttered, letting the chakra dissipate. "Too much, right? That's what Uruka always says." "It's not too much," Mikoto said quietly. "You just have far more of it than most people, and no one's taught you how to manage the volume." She stood, moved around the table, and knelt beside him. Her hands were gentle when she took his and turned them palms up. "The academy teaches chakra control as if everyone has the same amount to work with. That's fine for most students. For you, it's like trying to pour a river through a garden hose. The technique they taught you was never going to work because it wasn't designed for someone with your reserves." Naruto blinked at her. "My reserves? You have an enormous amount of chakra, Naruto-kun. Probably more than anyone your age in the village, possibly more than most jonin." She said it matter-of-factly, the way you'd tell someone they were tall or left-handed. "The problem isn't that you can't control it. The problem is that no one's given you the right tools." Sasuke's chopsticks had stopped moving entirely. He was staring at his mother with an expression that mixed surprise and something sharper, jealousy, maybe, or the competitive flair of someone who'd just been told another kid had a bigger sandbox. "I can show you an exercise," Mikoto continued. "It's not academy standard. It's something the Uchiha use for clan members who awaken their Sharingan early and suddenly have to manage a much larger chakra flow than they're used to." She caught herself, seemed to weigh something internally, and then pushed past it. "It won't fix everything overnight, but it should help. You'd teach me that." Naruto's voice came out smaller than he intended. "I just said I would." "But why? I mean, I'm not Uchiha. I'm not even most people don't." He stopped himself before the sentence finished, but the shape of it hung in the air anyway. Most people don't want to help me. Mikoto held his gaze. Her eyes, so dark they seemed to absorb light, were steady and warm and absolutely serious. Because someone should have done this a long time ago, and I'm sorry no one did. The moment sat there, fragile and enormous, and Naruto did not cry. He wanted to, and his eyes burned with the effort of not doing it, but he did not cry. He grinned instead, the big, too-wide grin he used like a shield, and said, "All right, let's do it. What's the exercise? Is it cool? Does it involve fire? The Uchiha are all about fire, right?" "It involves a leaf," Mikoto said dryly, "and patience. Two things I suspect you'll find equally challenging." Sasuke made a sound suspiciously like a laugh. They moved to the backyard. It was a proper training space, a flat area of packed earth bordered by a wooden fence and a row of bamboo. A few training posts stood at one end, scarred with kunai marks. The evening light was turning amber, casting long shadows across the ground, and the air had finally started to cool. Mikoto picked a leaf from the garden, placed it on Naruto's forehead, and told him to hold it there with chakra. "That's it," he said, incredulous. "That's the exercise. We did this on, like, the first week of academy." "You did a version of it. The academy version asks you to push chakra outward to stick the leaf. I'm asking you to do the opposite, pull chakra inward, concentrate it into the smallest point you can manage, and let the leaf adhere through precision instead of force." "What's the difference?" "The difference is that your way uses a flood to hold a pebble in place. My way uses a single drop." She placed her finger on the leaf, centering it between his eyebrows. "Close your eyes. Feel the chakra in your body, all of it, the whole current. Don't try to push it anywhere, just feel where it is." Naruto closed his eyes. He could feel it, the vast, churning warmth that lived in his core, spiraling through pathways he'd never been taught to map. There was so much of it. He'd always known that on some level, known it the way you know the ocean is deep without having measured it. When he tried to use jutsu, it was like opening a floodgate and hoping the water went where he wanted. It never did. Now, instead of pushing it outward, I want you to pull it to a single point, right here. She tapped his forehead, just below the leaf. Imagine you're drawing a thread from the center of your body to this spot. One thread, thin as spider silk. He tried, reached for the churning mass of energy and attempted to extract a single strand from it. The chakra surged immediately, eager and overwhelming, like a dog that didn't understand the concept of gentle. He felt it rush toward his forehead in a wave, and the leaf blew off his face and plastered itself against the fence behind him. "Okay," Mikoto said mildly. "Again." He tried again. And again. The leaf flew off. It stuck and then burst into confetti. It adhered for half a second and then launched upward like a tiny green missile. Each attempt ended in some new and creative form of failure, and with each one, Naruto's frustration built. Not the lazy, performative frustration he showed at the academy, but a real, grinding, tooth-clenching frustration born from actually wanting to succeed and not being able to. "This is impossible," he muttered after the 11th attempt. "It's not impossible, it's just hard." Mikoto placed a new leaf on his forehead with the practiced patience of someone who'd raised Itachi Uchiha. Again. Sasuke had been sitting on the back porch watching, chin in his hand, for the past 20 minutes. He hadn't said a word, which for Sasuke was practically a standing ovation of attention. Now he shifted, and Naruto caught him watching with an expression that was hard to read, part disdain, part curiosity, part something that looked almost like respect for the sheer stubbornness of continuing to fail and not quitting. On the 17th attempt, the leaf stayed. It stayed for 3 seconds. 3 wobbly, trembling seconds during which Naruto held his breath and felt the thinnest possible thread of chakra, barely a whisper, the merest suggestion of energy, connecting his forehead to the leaf. It felt completely different from anything he'd done before. Not a flood. Not even a stream, a single drop, held in place by concentration and the desperate refusal to let it become more. Then it fell, and Naruto opened his eyes and his face split into a grin so wide it hurt. "Did you see that?" Did you? 3 seconds. Sasuke said from the porch, unimpressed. I could do that when I was 7. I didn't ask you. 3 seconds is 3 more than 0 and 0 is what I had 10 minutes ago, so. Both accurate points, Mikoto interjected. She was looking at Naruto with an expression he'd come to associate with her, that mix of warmth and private calculation, as if she was seeing things about him that she wasn't sharing. You have the principle now. Practice every day. The goal is to hold the leaf for 60 seconds without it moving. When you can do that, we'll try something harder. Harder like what? Walking on water? Naruto's eyes went wide. You can teach me that. 1 step at a time, literally. She looked at the sky where the amber was deepening toward purple. It's getting late. Sasuke walked Naruto to the gate. Why do I have to? Sasuke. The word carried the specific harmonic frequency of maternal authority that transcended clan, village, and possibly dimension. Sasuke stood up without further protest. They walked back through the compound as the light faded and the street lamps came on, smaller than the ones in the main village. Paper lanterns strung along the eaves of buildings, giving the streets a warm amber glow. The compound was busier now than it had been when Naruto arrived. People were coming home from wherever they'd been, filtering through the streets in small groups, and the tension Naruto had felt earlier was more visible in the gathering dusk. Knots of adults stood at corners, talking in low voices. A few gave Naruto hard looks as he passed. One man, tall, scarred, with the rigid posture of military police, stopped Sasuke directly. Who's this? He jerked his chin at Naruto, a classmate. My mom invited him. Sasuke said it flatly, with a note of challenge that surprised Naruto, like he was daring the man to make something of it. The man looked at Naruto. His eyes did that thing, the flicker of recognition, the slight hardening. Then he looked back at Sasuke, seemed to decide it wasn't worth the argument with the clan head son, and moved on. They walked in silence for another minute before Naruto said, That happened a lot. What? People checking up on who's in the compound. Sasuke's jaw tightened. More lately. He didn't elaborate and Naruto didn't push. They reached the gate and Sasuke stopped, hands in his pockets, looking at a point somewhere past Naruto's left shoulder. You should come back, Sasuke said. Then, quickly, as if the words had escaped without permission, for training, Mom doesn't teach people often. You'd be stupid not to take advantage of it. Is that your way of saying you want to hang out? Absolutely not. Sounds like it. Come back or don't. I don't care. Sasuke turned and walked back into the compound without looking back. Naruto watched him go, then turned toward the village proper. The streets were fully dark now, lamplit and quiet, and he walked home with the taste of good food in his mouth, and the ghost of a leaf swayed on his forehead, and something unfamiliar sitting in his chest. He was halfway home before he identified the feeling. He felt like he belonged somewhere. He came back the next day, and the day after. Mikoto didn't make a production of it. She didn't set up formal lessons or write out a training schedule or announce to anyone that she was tutoring the village pariah. Naruto would show up in the late afternoon, Mikoto would let him in, and they'd work on whatever she deemed appropriate. Sometimes it was the leaf exercise, which he was improving at 10 seconds by Thursday, 20 by Saturday, the thread of chakra growing steadier with each attempt. Sometimes it was more fundamental. How to breathe during jutsu formation, he'd been holding his breath, which constricted chakra flow. How to stand properly in a combat stance. His academy form was, in Mikoto's diplomatic phrasing, creative. How to read terrain before a fight. The Sharingan gives Uchiha an advantage in reading opponents, she told him one afternoon as they stood in the backyard. But before we ever awaken it, we're taught to observe with our natural eyes. Where is the sun? Where are the shadows? Is the ground soft or hard, uphill or down? What does your opponent's weight distribution tell you about their next move? These aren't clan secrets, Naruto-kun. This is basic combat awareness that any genin should have. They don't teach this stuff at the academy. No, they teach you to throw kunai and perform jutsu. Which is like teaching someone to swing a hammer without showing them what a nail looks like. She paused. I need you to understand something. You are not weak. You are not stupid. You are untaught. There's a vast difference. He didn't have a snappy comeback for that one. He just nodded and threw the kunai she handed him at the target post, adjusting his grip the way she'd shown him. It hit 2 inches from center, his best throw yet. The training always ended with dinner. Mikoto seemed to consider feeding him a non-negotiable component of their arrangement, and Naruto was in no position to argue. The meals were always home-cooked, always generous, and always served at that same low table with place settings for whoever was home. Sometimes it was just the 3 of them, Naruto, Mikoto, Sasuke. Sometimes Sasuke brought out a shogi board afterward and they played badly while Mikoto read or did dishes. Sometimes Sasuke wasn't there at all, off training on his own, and it was just Naruto and Mikoto sitting across from each other in comfortable quiet. It was during one of those quiet evenings that Naruto worked up the courage to ask. "Mikoto-san, the stuff you told me, in the alley." He kept his voice low even though the house was empty. "Is it? Are things getting worse?" She was pouring tea and her hands didn't falter. She finished pouring, set the pot down, and sat back. The lamplight caught the planes of her face and turned them to amber and shadow. "Yes," she said simply. "How bad?" "Bad enough that I'm running out of time to make a difference." She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "You're carrying this well, you know, better than many adults would. I'm not carrying anything. I don't even really understand what's happening." "You understand more than you think." She sipped her tea. "What do you know about why the Uchiha compound is where it is?" "What do you mean?" "We're on the eastern edge of the village, separated from the rest of Konoha by walls and a gate. Do you think we chose that?" Naruto frowned. He'd never thought about it. The compound was the compound. It was where the Uchiha lived. Like the Hyuga had their estate and the Nara had their forest, clans had their places. "After the Nine-Tails attack," Mikoto said quietly, "the village leadership relocated the Uchiha clan to this compound. Officially, it was a security measure. Unofficially," she turned her teacup in her hands, "there were suspicions. The Sharingan can control the Nine-Tails. It's been done before. Some in the village leadership believed an Uchiha was responsible for the attack. They were never able to prove it, but the suspicion was enough. So they moved us here. Put us under surveillance. Removed us from positions of influence. The military police, our role in the village, became a way to keep us busy and visible, not a position of genuine authority." Naruto stared at her. That's not fair." "No, it isn't." She met his eyes. "And it's been 12 years. 12 years of being watched, marginalized, treated like potential traitors. My husband and the clan elders have reached the end of their patience. They want to take back what was taken from them. I understand why. I even agree with much of their grievance. But their solution," she stopped, breathed. "Their solution will destroy everything. If the Uchiha move against the village will respond with overwhelming force. We would lose. And even in the unlikely event that we succeeded, the other hidden villages would see a weakened Konoha and attack within months. Civil war, then invasion. Thousands dead. The clan, the village, everything gone. But you're trying to stop it." "I'm trying to give the Hokage enough information to find another way. A diplomatic solution. Remove the surveillance. Restore the clan's position. Address the legitimate grievances without bloodshed." Her voice was steady, but Naruto could hear the strain underneath, like a wire pulled too tight. "The problem is that the Hokage moves slowly. He deliberates, he forms committees, and the clock is ticking. What about Itachi? Does he know?" Something shifted in Mikoto's face, a flicker of pain there and gone. "Itachi has his own path through this. We don't coordinate directly. It's safer that way." Naruto wanted to ask more, but the front door slid open and Sasuke's voice echoed down the hallway, "I'm home!" And like a switch being flipped, Mikoto was a different person. The heaviness left her face, her posture softened, and when Sasuke appeared in the doorway, sweaty and grass-stained from training, she smiled at him with uncomplicated warmth. "How was practice?" "Fine. I landed the second fireball variation." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." "There's food in the kitchen." Sasuke nodded, noticed Naruto, and said, "You're here again." "Yep. Don't you have your own house? Don't you have manners?" Sasuke almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth twitched, which was close enough. He disappeared into the kitchen, and Naruto heard cabinets opening, dishes clinking, the small domestic sounds of a kid getting his own dinner. Mikoto watched him go, and the expression on her face in that unguarded moment was so raw that Naruto had to look away. It was love, obviously, fierce, consuming, terrified love. The love of a mother who knew exactly what was coming and was tearing herself apart trying to stop it. "Mikoto-san," Naruto said quietly. I won't tell anyone, I promised, and I mean it, but," he struggled for the words. "If there's something I can do, anything, I know I'm just a kid and I'm not strong yet, but if there's anything I can do to help, you're already helping," she said. "More than you know." He didn't understand what she meant by that, not yet. The days settled into a rhythm, and inside that rhythm, Naruto began to change. Not dramatically. He didn't suddenly become a genius or unlock some hidden power or transform into a different person. He was still loud, still impulsive, still prone to saying exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong time. But the edges were shifting. When he showed up at the compound each afternoon, he was a fraction more focused than the day before. The leaf exercise that had seemed impossible in the first session became routine, 30 seconds by the end of the first week, 45 by the middle of the second. His hands stopped shaking when he molded chakra. His kunai throws started hitting within an inch of center more often than not. And it wasn't just the physical skills. Mikoto taught the way she talked, with precision and patience and an absolute refusal to accept excuses. When Naruto said, "I can't do it," she'd say, "You can't do it yet." When he got frustrated and wanted to skip ahead to something flashier, she'd set another leaf on his forehead and tell him that foundations weren't glamorous, but buildings without them fell down. When he complained about being bored, she'd raise an eyebrow and say, "Boredom is what undisciplined people feel when they run out of distractions," which was the most Uchiha sentence he'd ever heard, but she also told him stories. Small ones, woven into the training almost accidentally, how she'd met Fugaku. He was the most serious boy I'd ever seen, and I made it my personal mission to make him laugh at least once a week. How she'd trained as a genin alongside Kushina Uzumaki. She was loud, stubborn, terrifying in a fight, and the best friend I ever had. Naruto's heart had stopped at that one. "You knew my mom." Mikoto's hands had paused over the onions she was cutting, a beat of silence. Then, softly, "I knew your mother very well. She was magnificent, Naruto, absolutely magnificent." "What was she like?" "Like you, exactly like you." The same smile, the same stubbornness, the same ability to walk into a room and make everyone in it feel something whether they wanted to or not. She resumed cutting, and if her eyes were wet, the onions provided plausible deniability. "She loved you. I need you to know that. From the moment she knew you were coming, she loved you with everything she had." Naruto didn't say anything for a while after that. He sat at the kitchen counter and stared at his hands and breathed through the enormous, aching, wonderful weight of knowing that his mother had been real and had been loved and had loved him. "I wish I'd known her," he finally said. "She would have been so proud of you." Mikoto said it with absolute conviction, like it was a fact of the universe, like gravity or sunrise. "Never doubt that." And then she handed him a knife and taught him how to dice onions properly, because Mikoto Uchiha processed emotion through practical action, and honestly, so did Naruto. Sasuke's resistance to Naruto's presence in his home eroded with the slow inevitability of water against stone. It started with proximity. Sasuke would be training in the backyard when Naruto arrived for his lesson, and instead of leaving, he'd stay. Lurking on the porch, pretending to read, watching from behind a scroll he wasn't turning the pages of. Then proximity became commentary, "Your stance is too wide," or "You're telegraphing with your shoulder." Delivered with Sasuke's characteristic bluntness, but containing, Naruto gradually realized, actually useful information. Then commentary became participation. Mikoto would be showing Naruto a taijutsu combination, and Sasuke would wander over and say, "That's not how you do it. Here, let me show him." And suddenly they were sparring. Not the formal, supervised bouts of the academy, but real sparring, messy, competitive, punctuated by trash talk and the occasional cheap shot and Mikoto's voice from the porch saying, "If either of you breaks anything, you're both doing dishes for a month." Sasuke was better than him. That was just reality. Sasuke had been training with clan techniques since he could walk, had a father who was clan head and a brother who was a prodigy, had the genetic lottery ticket of the Uchiha bloodline waiting to be cashed. Naruto had 6 weeks of after-school lessons from Sasuke's mom and a lifetime of stubbornness, but the gap was narrower than it had been. Naruto could see that, and more importantly, Sasuke could see it too. The first time Naruto actually tagged him, a quick jab to the ribs during a combination that Sasuke didn't see coming. They both froze and stared at each other for a second before Sasuke said, "Lucky shot," and Naruto said, "Do it again and find out." And they went back at it with renewed intensity. They didn't talk about feelings. They were 12-year-old boys. Feelings were expressed through punching. But the rivalry, which had been hollow and one-sided at the academy, was becoming something real. A mutual sharpening, a competition that pushed them both, an unspoken acknowledgement that the other person was worth trying to beat. One evening, after a sparring session that had left them both grass-stained and breathing hard, Sasuke sat on the porch steps and said, without preamble, "My dad doesn't have time for me lately." Naruto, who'd been gulping water from a bottle, looked at him. Sasuke wasn't looking back. He was staring at the training posts, jaw tight, that mask of indifference firmly in place but cracking at the seams. "He's always in meetings, always at the shrine, always talking to the elders. I keep asking him to train with me and he says later and later never comes." Sasuke pulled a blade of grass apart methodically. "Itachi's never home either. He says he's on missions, but sometimes I see him leaving at weird hours and he looks," he trailed off. "Looks how? Tired. Not normal tired, like something's eating him from the inside." Naruto's stomach clenched. He knew things about Sasuke's family that Sasuke didn't know, and the weight of that knowledge was a physical thing, pressing against his ribs every time Sasuke said something innocent about his dad or his brother. He wanted to tell him. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to just say it. Your clan is planning something terrible, and your mom is trying to stop it, and everything you know might be about to fall apart. But he'd made a promise. And underneath, the promise was the harder truth. Telling Sasuke wouldn't help. What would it do? Terrify a 12-year-old, make him confront his father, blow Mikoto's cover. There was no version of telling Sasuke the truth that made anything better, so Naruto did the only thing he could. He sat down next to Sasuke on the porch steps, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and said, "My dad's dead and I never knew him, so I can't really compare. But I know what it's like to feel invisible to the people who are supposed to see you." Sasuke was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That sucks." "Yeah, for you, I mean, not knowing your dad. Yeah, it does." More silence, crickets starting up in the bamboo, the last light bleeding out of the sky. "You can keep coming over," Sasuke said, "to train if you want. I was going to keep coming over anyway." "I know." "I'm saying you can." "Oh, well, thank you, Your Highness, for the gracious permission." "Shut up, Naruto. Make me." Sasuke shoved him off the step. Naruto grabbed his sleeve on the way down and pulled him with him. They ended up in a heap on the grass, wrestling with zero technique and maximum aggression, until Mikoto leaned out the back door and said dinner was ready, and if they tracked dirt on her floors, she would end them both. They scrambled inside, shoving each other through the doorway, and sat at the table across from each other with matching grass stains and something between them that was starting to feel like friendship. It was a Thursday night, 3 weeks into Naruto's visits, when Itachi came home. Naruto was in the kitchen, ostensibly helping Mikoto prepare dinner, but mostly eating the vegetable scraps she was generating and getting his hands gently slapped away from the cooking pot. Sasuke was in the living room, working on homework that he'd been avoiding all week. The house had the comfortable, cluttered warmth of an evening at home, and Naruto had settled into it so completely that he almost didn't flinch when the front door opened, and a presence filled the Genkin that was qualitatively different from anyone else who'd walked through it. Itachi Uchiha moved like water. That was the first thing Naruto noticed, not his appearance, not the Anbu uniform he was still wearing, not the weariness that hung on him like a second skin, but the way he moved. Silent, fluid, every motion containing exactly the energy required and not a fraction more. He was 13, barely a year older than Naruto and Sasuke, but he carried himself with the gravity of someone who'd seen the inside of decades. Niai-san. Sasuke's voice from the living room, bright and eager. He appeared in the hallway so fast he must have sensed Itachi's chakra before the door even opened. "You're home. When did you get back? How was the mission? Can we train tomorrow? I've been working on the Phoenix Sage Fire and I almost..." "Sasuke?" Itachi smiled, tired, genuine, heartbreaking. He reached out and did something with 2 fingers to Sasuke's forehead, a gentle poke that made Sasuke scowl. "I'm glad to be home. We'll talk about training after dinner." Then his eyes found Naruto. Itachi's gaze was nothing like Sasuke's. Where Sasuke looked at you with the sharpness of competition and barely concealed curiosity, Itachi looked at you with something vast and still and deeply, deeply analytical. It wasn't hostile. It was worse than hostile. It was knowing, like he was reading a book written in your bone marrow. "Uzumaki Naruto," Itachi said. "My mother mentioned you were visiting." Yeah, hi." Naruto's eloquence was, as usual, staggering. Itachi held his gaze for a beat longer than comfortable, then turned to the kitchen. "Mother, can we speak?" "After dinner," Mikoto said, and her tone carried the same steel she'd used when Sasuke tried to argue with her, pleasant, warm, absolutely non-negotiable. "Wash up and sit down. Both of you, all of you." Dinner that night was a different animal. The table was set for 4 again, but this time all 4 seats were filled, Mikoto at one end, Itachi and Sasuke on one side, Naruto across from them. Fugaku was absent at another meeting, and the space where he should have been sitting seemed to exert its own gravity. Itachi ate slowly and spoke less. Sasuke talked enough for both of them, animated and buzzing with the energy of having his brother home, peppering Itachi with questions about missions and techniques, and whether he'd fought anyone interesting. Itachi answered with gentle, carefully edited responses that gave Sasuke just enough to satisfy him without revealing anything real. It was masterful, in a sad way. The performance of a normal older brother, maintained through what Naruto could now see was exhaustion so deep it had become structural. Naruto watched them and felt something complicated twist in his chest. Sasuke worshipped Itachi. That was obvious, written in every eager question and every attempt to impress. And Itachi loved Sasuke. That was obvious too, in the way his tired eyes softened every time he looked at his little brother. But between them was a gulf of unsaid things so wide you could fall into it and never hit bottom. After dinner, Sasuke dragged Itachi to the backyard to show him the Phoenix Sage Fire technique he'd been working on. Naruto hung back in the kitchen, helping Mikoto with the dishes, and when the back door slid shut, the silence between them changed weight. "He knows something is wrong," Naruto said quietly, handing her a rinsed plate. "Itachi?" "Sasuke. He told me your husband's been in meetings all the time, that Itachi's never home. He's not stupid. He can feel it." Mikoto took the plate and dried it with a cloth, her movements precise and automatic. "Children always feel it. They don't have the words for it, but they feel it." She placed the plate in the cabinet and closed the door with a soft click. "Naruto-kun, Itachi is going to want to talk to you. About what? About why you're here, about what you know." She turned to face him, and the kitchen lamplight caught the angles of her face and made her look older than she was. "He's very protective. Of me, of Sasuke, of this family. He's going to see you as a variable. An unknown. Should I be worried? No, but be honest with him. He's carrying enough lies already. He doesn't need another person being careful around him. She paused, then added more quietly, "He's my son and I love him beyond reason, and he is the loneliest person I have ever known. In that way, you two have something in common." Naruto dried the last dish and set it on the counter. Through the back window, he could see Sasuke in the yard, cheeks puffed, blowing a stream of small fireballs at a training post while Itachi watched and offered quiet corrections. "Normal, domestic, brothers. Mikoto-san, how much time do we have?" She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Weeks, maybe less." The fireballs outside popped and flared, orange against the darkening sky. Itachi found him on the way out. Naruto was at the compound gate, hands in his pockets, about to step through into the village streets, when a voice came from the shadow of the wall beside him. Not startling, Itachi wasn't the type to deliberately frighten people, but present in a way that made it clear he'd been waiting. "Walk with me," Itachi said. It wasn't a request. Naruto recognized the tone, polite, measured, carrying an authority that had nothing to do with volume. He fell into step beside Itachi, and they walked along the compound wall, away from the gate, into the quiet perimeter where the lamplight thinned out and the boundary between Uchiha and village became a literal line of stone. Itachi didn't speak for the first 50 meters. He walked with his hands at his sides, Anbu uniform traded for a simple dark shirt and pants, and in the dimness he looked even younger than he was, a kid really, with circles under his eyes that belonged on a man twice his age. "My mother trusts you," Itachi said finally. "Yeah, I guess she does." "Do you understand how unusual that is, considering what she trusted me with?" "Yeah, I get it." Itachi glanced at him, that deep, measuring look. "She told me what happened, that you were in the wrong place at the wrong time and she chose to bring you in rather than." He didn't finish the sentence. "I want to know why she was right to do that." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you are a 12-year-old academy student with no clan, no family, and no particular reason to keep a secret that could get my mother killed. I mean that the information you carry is valuable enough that people with far more training and far more to lose have been compromised. I mean that I need to understand, not trust, not yet, but understand why you haven't told anyone." Naruto stopped walking. Itachi stopped 2 steps later and turned to face him. "Because she asked me not to," Naruto said. "That's it, that's the whole reason. That's not a reason, that's sentiment. Maybe, but it's the truth." Naruto met Itachi's eyes, which was harder than any combat he'd ever been in, because Itachi's eyes held things in them that Naruto could feel even without the sharing in weight and sorrow, and a will like cold iron. "She's the first person who's ever—" He stopped, started again. "She looked at me like I was a person, not the fox kid, not the dead last, not a problem, a person. She taught me things nobody else bothered to teach me. She fed me. She told me about my mom." His voice was rougher than he wanted it to be. "You want a strategic reason, I don't have one. I'm not smart enough for strategies. I just know she trusted me, and no one's ever done that before, and I would rather die than be the reason something bad happens to her." The words hung in the night air between them. A moth circled a distant street lamp. Somewhere in the compound, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Itachi looked at him for a long time, and then something in that exhausted, guarded, ancient young face shifted. Not a smile. Itachi didn't smile the way other people did, but a softening. A fractional release of tension, like a knot loosened by a single thread. "Kushina-san," Itachi said quietly. "What?" "You remind me of what my mother told me about Uzumaki Kushina, your mother." He paused. "She said Kushina had an absolute inability to be anything other than exactly who she was, and that this quality was simultaneously her greatest strength and the source of most of her problems." Naruto blinked. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." Itachi turned and resumed walking, and Naruto scrambled to keep up. "I'm not going to tell you what's happening. My mother has told you enough, and more knowledge is more danger, but I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If the situation deteriorates, if something happens to me, or to my mother, or if the compound goes dark, you take Sasuke and you run. Don't ask questions. Don't try to fight. You take my brother and you get him somewhere safe." The weight of that request settled on Naruto's shoulders like a physical load. He thought about Sasuke on the porch, talking about his dad never having time for him. Sasuke in the yard, blowing fireballs, trying so hard to impress a brother who might not be there tomorrow. "I'll protect him," Naruto said. "I promise." Itachi nodded once. Then he flickered, the same instantaneous movement the Anbu in the alley had used, and Naruto was alone on the dark path beside the compound wall, with the crickets and the lamplight and the full, crushing weight of everything he now carried. He walked home slowly that night. The streets were empty and the cracks in his ceiling were waiting. 47 of them. He'd have to count again, just to be sure. Chapter 3. The eye of the storm, Naruto held the leaf for 53 seconds on a Monday morning, standing barefoot in the Uchiha backyard, with the sun cutting through the bamboo in sharp diagonal lines. 53 seconds of a single thread of chakra, gossamer thin, perfectly controlled, connecting his forehead to a scrap of green no bigger than his thumbnail. He could feel it with a clarity that still startled him after weeks of practice. The exact boundary where his energy ended and the leaf's surface began, the precise amount of force required to hold without pushing, the vast reservoir of power behind him held in check like a river behind a dam. Not straining, just waiting, patient. Then a bird landed on the fence 3 feet away and startled the hell out of him, and the leaf shot off his forehead like a bullet and embedded itself in the training post. 53, Mikoto said from the porch, where she'd been watching with a cup of tea. 7 seconds short. The bird, in combat, there will be more distracting things than birds. Yeah, but I'm not in combat, I'm in your backyard. And if you can't maintain focus in my backyard, you'll never maintain it on a battlefield. She set her tea down and stood. Again. And this time, I'm going to throw things at you. You're going to what? The first pebble hit him in the shoulder before he finished the sentence. Mikoto, it turned out, had a throwing arm that would put most academy instructors to shame. She lobbed pebbles at him at irregular intervals, shoulder, knee, ribs, the back of his head, and each one disrupted his concentration just enough to send the leaf trembling. The first 3 attempts ended in failure. The 4th, 5th, and 6th ended in failure with bruises. On the 7th, something clicked. Not consciously, it wasn't a thought or a decision. It was more like a gear finding its groove after months of grinding. The pebble hit his arm, and the jolt traveled through his body and reached his chakra network, and instead of disrupting the thread absorbed it. Flexed around the disturbance like a reed bending in wind and springing back. The leaf wobbled, held, another pebble. His thigh this time. The thread bent and held another. His chest, bend, hold. Mikoto stopped throwing. Naruto stood in the yard with his eyes closed, and the leaf on his forehead, and his body singing with a quiet, fierce joy that had nothing to do with the exercise and everything to do with the fact that for the first time in his life, his chakra was doing exactly what he told it to. 60 seconds. Mikoto said. Her voice was different, softer, but also somehow more intense. "Naruto, you can open your eyes." He did. She was standing at the edge of the porch, and her expression was one he hadn't seen before, not the calm teaching face, not the warm maternal smile, something deeper. Something that looked almost like awe. "You just maintained chakra control through physical disruption," she said. "At your age, with your reserves, that should have taken months. It's been weeks. I know, that's what I'm saying." She stepped down into the yard and crossed to him. "You have a gift, Naruto-kun. Not the one the village talks about, not the thing sealed inside you. Something that's entirely yours. You adapt. You take in new information and your body integrates it at a speed that shouldn't be possible. You're not a genius. Don't let that go to your head, but you are something that might be rarer. You're a natural integrator." A natural what? Someone whose body learns faster than their mind. Your conscious brain is still catching up to what your chakra network figured out 10 minutes ago. She plucked the leaf from his forehead. "It's why the academy system fails you. They teach to the mind first and the body second. You work the other way around. Show your body what to do and your mind follows." Naruto turned that over. It fit, actually. He'd never been able to learn from lectures or textbooks. The information just slid off him like water off glass. But when someone showed him, when he could feel it in his muscles and his chakra, it stuck. Like the throwing form Mikoto had corrected, she'd moved his arm into the right position once, and his body had remembered it perfectly every time since. "So I'm not stupid," he said. "I just learn weird. You learn differently. Stupid is the last word I would use for you." She held up the leaf. "Again, no pebbles this time. I want you to do something new. Hold the leaf and walk. Maintain the thread while your body is in motion." He groaned. She raised an eyebrow. He took the leaf. The compound felt different that week. Tighter. The ambient tension Naruto had sensed on his first visit had been a low hum, a background frequency. Now it was a vibration he could feel in the soles of his feet, more people on the streets, and fewer of them smiling. Conversations that stopped when he walked by lasted longer in the silence after they ended. The military police, Uchiha in their distinctive uniforms, were more visible, moving in pairs where before they'd walked alone, and the meetings. Always the meetings. Fugaku Uchiha was a ghost in his own house. Naruto had been visiting for nearly a month and had seen the man exactly twice. Once at a distance, crossing the compound with 3 other men, their heads bent in conversation, and once at dinner on an evening Naruto wasn't supposed to be there. That second encounter still rattled him. It had been a Wednesday. Naruto had lost track of time during training and was still in the backyard when the front door opened, and Fugaku's voice filled the house like weather, deep, commanding, the kind of voice that reshaped the air pressure in a room. Naruto had frozen, looked at Mikoto, and seen a flash of something calculated cross her face before she smoothed it away. "Stay," she'd said. "It's fine, you're a guest." Fugaku Uchiha was exactly what Naruto had expected and nothing like what he'd expected, simultaneously. He was tall and straight-backed and wore his face like a mask, not blank, but composed, every expression deliberate and measured. The Uchiha clan head. The man whose grievances were real and whose solutions would be catastrophic. Naruto had built a version of him in his head from Mikoto's words. A proud man, a dangerous man, a man who loved his family. And the real thing was all of those things at once, which made him much harder to categorize than Naruto wanted him to be. Fugaku had looked at Naruto the way he looked at everything, with the assessing gaze of a man who sorted the world into assets, threats, and irrelevancies. Naruto watched him arrive at a conclusion in real time, irrelevant. The Uzumaki boy, Fugaku had said, not hostile, not warm. Just a fact being stated. Naruto is Sasuke's classmate, Mikoto had said smoothly. I've been helping him with some basic training. He's been keeping Sasuke company. Fugaku's gaze had moved to Sasuke, who was sitting very still with the particular rigid posture of a child who desperately wanted his father's approval and was terrified of doing something wrong. Is that so? Yeah, we spar sometimes. Sasuke's voice was careful, measured. A miniature version of his father's control. Fugaku had nodded once, dismissively, and the conversation had moved on. He'd eaten dinner with them, asked Sasuke about his academy grades and his fireball technique, and spoken to Mikoto about household matters with the polite efficiency of 2 people who loved each other and were holding back oceans of things they couldn't say. He'd ignored Naruto completely, which was, Naruto reflected, actually one of the better receptions he'd ever gotten from an adult, but there had been a moment. Brief, almost invisible. Fugaku had reached for the soy sauce at the same time as Mikoto, and their hands had touched, and Fugaku's composure had cracked for exactly 1 heartbeat. He'd looked at his wife with an expression of such naked tenderness and such bottomless exhaustion that Naruto had felt like an intruder in his own skin. Then it was gone, and Fugaku was the clan head again, and the meal continued. Later that night, walking home, Naruto had thought, that's a man who knows he's leading his family off a cliff and can't see another road. It didn't make what Fugaku was doing right, but it made it real in a way that hurt. Sasuke was getting suspicious. Not about the secret. Naruto was careful about that, never mentioning Mikoto's intelligence work, never referencing the alley, never reacting when Sasuke mentioned something about clan politics that brushed up against what Naruto knew. But Sasuke was perceptive in the way that quiet, watchful children often were, and he'd started picking up on the edges of Naruto's discomfort. It came to a head on a hot afternoon in the second week. They were sparring in the backyard, Mikoto gone to the market, the house empty. Sasuke had just landed a combination that swept Naruto's legs and put him flat on his back, and instead of getting up immediately like he usually did, Naruto lay there staring at the sky. "Get up," Sasuke said, standing over him. "In a minute." "Get up, Naruto, we're not done." "I said give me a minute." Sasuke's eyes narrowed. He dropped into a crouch, elbows on his knees, and studied Naruto's face with that uncomfortable intensity he'd inherited from both his parents. "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing's wrong with me." "Something's been wrong with you for 3 days. You keep zoning out. You look at my mom when she's not watching. You flinch whenever someone mentions the clan meetings." Sasuke's voice was flat and direct. "I'm not blind, Naruto." Naruto's heart rate spiked. He kept his face neutral, a skill he'd been practicing, though he'd never be as good at it as any Uchiha, and sat up. "Nothing's wrong. I've got stuff on my mind." "What stuff?" "Just stuff. Academy stuff." "The academy's on break. Summer homework stuff. You don't do homework." "Maybe I'm starting." Sasuke stared at him. The silence stretched. Then Sasuke rocked back on his heels and said quietly, with a vulnerability he'd never have shown if anyone else were present, "You know something about my family." Naruto's mouth went dry. "Sasuke, I'm not asking you to tell me. I'm telling you I know you know something." Sasuke's jaw was tight, his dark eyes burning with a combination of hurt and anger and the desperate pride of someone refusing to beg. "My dad won't talk to me. My brother won't talk to me. My mom smiles at me and then goes into the kitchen, and I can hear her breathing like she's about to fall apart. And now you, the one person I thought was just here because he wanted to be, you're hiding something too." "I am here because I want to be." "Then why won't you be straight with me?" "Because your mom is spying on your family. Because your clan is planning a coup that will destroy them. Because your brother is tangled up in something so dark, he looks like a dead man walking. Because I made a promise, and breaking it could get the only person who's ever been kind to me killed." "Because some things aren't mine to tell," Naruto said. "And I know that sounds like garbage, and I know it doesn't help, and I'm sorry, Sasuke. I'm really sorry." Sasuke looked at him for a long moment. Then he stood up, turned away, and said, "Let's go again." They sparred for another hour. Harder than before, more aggressive, both of them pouring things they couldn't say into the impact of fists and feet. When they finally stopped, panting, bruised, sprawled on the grass side by side, Sasuke said to the sky, "If something bad is going to happen, tell me, not what, just tell me if." Naruto closed his eyes. He could feel the sun on his face, the grass pricking through his shirt, Sasuke's presence beside him, solid, real, trusting him with a question he desperately wanted answered. "I won't let anything happen to you," Naruto said. It wasn't an answer to the question Sasuke asked, and they both knew it. But Sasuke let out a breath and didn't push further, and they lay there in the grass until Mikoto came home and found them asleep in the yard like puppies. The confrontation between Itachi and Mikoto happened on a night Naruto wasn't supposed to witness. He'd left the compound at the usual time, walked 2 blocks toward the main village, and realized he'd left his jacket on the backyard fence. It was his only good jacket, the one without holes, and the nights were getting cooler. So he doubled back, slipped through the compound gate with the ease of someone who'd been doing it for weeks, and approached the Uchiha main house from the side entrance. The garden was dark. The house was lit from within, a warm glow through the paper screens. Naruto was reaching for the side gate when he heard Itachi's voice, clear and sharp in a way he'd never heard it, and he stopped cold. "How long?" Itachi's voice came through the open window of the room off the garden. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since before the relocation talk started." Mikoto's voice, controlled but with an edge. "Almost 2 years. 2 years. 2 years of intelligence drops, and you didn't tell me." "I couldn't tell you. You were already carrying too much." You were 14 when you joined Anbu, Itachi. 14. I was not going to add my operation to the weight on your shoulders. Your operation. A sound movement, someone pacing. You've been running a separate intelligence channel to the Hawkage's office, and I didn't. Itachi stopped. Drew a breath. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped, and Naruto had to strain to hear it. I've been reporting to the Hawkage myself, through my own contacts, parallel to you. We've been doing the same thing, feeding the same office, and neither of us knew. Silence. The kind that had physical weight. How much does Sarutobi know? Mikoto's voice was barely a whisper now. Everything I know. The coup timeline, the troop commitments, the leaders, the wavering factions. I've been his primary source on the Uchiha situation for over a year. And what has he done with it? Mikoto's control cracked just for a moment, not anger, something rower. What has he done, Itachi? Because I've been giving him the same information through my channel, and every time I ask for movement, I get promises, committees, deliberation, understanding. While our clan marches toward a war it cannot win. He's trying, he's stalling. The word came out sharp enough to cut. And every day he stalls, the elders dig in deeper, and your father gets more desperate, and the chance of a peaceful solution shrinks. I know you see it. I know you feel it. Another silence. Naruto was pressed against the garden wall, his forgotten jacket hanging on the fence 3 feet away, his heart in his throat. He knew he should leave. Every ethical instinct told him this conversation was not for him, but his feet wouldn't move. There's something else. Itachi said, What? Shisui, he has a plan. A pause. He has a technique, a Mangekyo ability, Kadomatsu Kami. It's a genjutsu that can influence the target's mind without them knowing. He wants to use it on father, on the clan leadership, subtly redirect them away from the coup. Make them believe the path toward reconciliation was their own idea. Mikoto was quiet for so long that Naruto wondered if she'd left the room. Then, a mind control technique on the clan leadership. It's more nuanced than that. It plants a suggestion, shapes existing inclinations. The targets wouldn't know they'd been influenced. I know what genjutsu can do, Itachi. I was a jonin before I was your mother. Another pause. And Shisui believes this will work. Shisui believes it's our last option for a bloodless resolution. When? He wants to act within the week. Before the next clan assembly. If he can turn father and 2 or 3 of the key elders, the coup collapses from within. Naruto heard Mikoto exhale, a long, shaking breath that carried the sound of a woman who'd been holding her lungs at half capacity for 2 years and was suddenly, tentatively allowing herself to breathe. Within the week, if it works. A sound that might have been a laugh or its inverse. And if it doesn't, Itachi didn't answer that. He didn't need to. The silence said it clearly enough. Shisui is a good person, Mikoto said quietly. If anyone can do this with a clean conscience, it's him. But Itachi, if this plan exists, others might know about it. Danzo doesn't know. You're sure? Shisui's been careful. Shisui is 20 years old and thinks being careful means looking both ways before crossing the street. Danzo is 63 years old and has been running covert operations since before either of us was born. If Danzo knows about the Kadomatsu Kami, he doesn't. If he does, then we deal with it. Itachi's voice went flat. I won't let anything happen to Shisui. More silence. Movement, someone crossing the room, and then a sound that Naruto didn't immediately identify until he did, and it hit him like a punch. The soft, muffled sound of a mother embracing her son. Cloth against cloth, a breath caught and held. My boy, Mikoto whispered. My brave, impossible boy. You were never supposed to carry this alone. Neither were you. I'm your mother, it's different. It's not different. It's exactly the same. Itachi's voice had changed, younger, rower, stripped of the Anbu composure and the old soul gravity. For just a moment, he sounded like what he was, a 13-year-old who was tired beyond description. I've been so afraid, Mother, every day, that I'd come home and it would have already started and I'd be too late. I know, sweetheart. If Shisui's plan works, then we have a chance. If it doesn't, then we make another plan and another after that. We don't stop. Mikoto's voice had found its iron again. Listen to me, Itachi. I am not going to let this clan die. I am not going to let your father die. I am not going to let you become something that destroys you. Do you hear me? There is a way through this that doesn't end in blood, and we are going to find it. And the boy, Naruto, what about him? Does he fit into this? He fits because he's already in it, whether any of us planned for that. He knows enough to be dangerous, and he's loyal enough to be safe. And he cares about Sasuke with a fierceness I haven't seen since Kushina cared about anything. A pause. Itachi, if the worst happens, the very worst, Naruto is the person I trust to protect your brother. He's 12. You were 11 when Anbu recruited you. Age is a poor metric for what a person can carry. Itachi was silent for a time. Then, so quietly Naruto almost missed it. Shisui said something similar. He said the Uzumaki boy had a light in him, that people like that, they change the shape of things around them just by being there. Shisui is wise. Shisui is an optimist. It's not the same thing. Sometimes it is. Naruto heard movement, the conversation shifting, breaking apart into smaller sounds. He unstuck himself from the wall, grabbed his jacket from the fence with trembling hands, and retreated the way he'd come. His legs felt strange, liquid, like they might buckle if he thought too hard about what he'd just heard. He made it 3 streets before he had to stop and press his back against a building and stare at the sky and remember how to breathe. Shisui. Kadomatsu Kami. A last hope for a bloodless solution. Within the week, it could work. For the first time since the alley, Naruto felt something fragile and terrifying bloom in his chest. Hope. He trained like a madman after that. Not at the compound, he still went there every afternoon, still worked with Mikoto, still sparred with Sasuke. But in the early mornings and late nights, alone, in the training grounds at the edge of the village where nobody went. The leaf exercise had graduated to something harder, walking on vertical surfaces. Mikoto had explained the principle, constant chakra emission from the soles of the feet, calibrated to the surface's resistance. And Naruto had taken to it with the desperate energy of someone who knew a clock was ticking, even if he couldn't see the dial. The first day, he'd gotten 3 steps up a tree before falling on his back hard enough to see stars. The second day, 5 steps. By the end of the week, he was halfway to the canopy before his control wavered. It was the same pattern Mikoto had identified. His body learned faster than his mind, his chakra network integrating the technique through repetition and physical memory rather than intellectual understanding. But it wasn't just tree walking. In the gray hours before dawn, Naruto ran. Not the casual jogging of the academy fitness test, real running, full sprint, pushing his body until his lungs burned and his vision blurred and his legs screamed for mercy. Then he'd stop, gasp, and run again. He did push-ups until his arms shook. He practiced the kunai forms Mikoto had taught him until his hands were calloused and his shoulders ached. He couldn't explain why exactly. The urgency was instinctual, animal, rooted in the same part of his brain that had kept him alive on the streets since he was small. Something was coming. He didn't know what shape it would take or when it would arrive, but it was coming, and he would not be caught unprepared and useless when it did. The promise he'd made to Itachi lived in him like a second heartbeat. Take Sasuke and run. 4 words that implied a scenario so terrible that running was the best option. Naruto didn't plan to run. He didn't plan to fight, either. He was realistic enough to know that whatever was happening in the Uchiha compound was so far above his weight class that he might as well be an ant at a summit meeting. But he could be strong enough to protect one person. One friend. That was a concrete, achievable goal, and Naruto clung to it the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. He was coming down from a tree-walking attempt, 12 meters, a new record when he felt it. Not chakra, not exactly. Something more primal. The sensation of being watched by someone who didn't want to be noticed. It prickled along the back of his neck, raised the fine hairs on his arms, and sent a jolt of adrenaline through his system that sharpened every sense he had. Naruto landed, turned slowly, and scanned the tree line. Nothing visible. The training ground was a clearing in the forest east of the village, surrounded by old-growth trees and underbrush. Dawn light filtered through the canopy in broken shafts. Birds were singing. Everything looked normal, but something was there. In the shadows between two massive oaks at the edge of his vision, a stillness that was too still to be natural. Not the stillness of an animal. Animals were never truly still. They breathed, they shifted, they blinked. This was the stillness of a trained operative holding absolute immobility. Root. The word surfaced in his mind from a conversation he'd half overheard between Mikoto and Itachi. Root, Danzo's personal Anbu division. The ones who operated in the cracks between official channels. The ones no one acknowledged. Naruto stared at the too-still shadow for 5 seconds. Then he made a deliberate show of stretching, yawning, and heading back toward the village at a casual pace, as if he'd noticed nothing. His back prickled the entire way. The feeling of being watched didn't fade until he reached the main streets and the morning crowd absorbed him. He didn't mention it to anyone. There was nothing to mention. He hadn't seen a face, a uniform, a Hittite, just a feeling, just a shadow that was too still. But he started varying his routes after that. Different training grounds, different times, different paths home. And he paid attention, the way Mikoto had taught him, to where the shadows fell and who moved through them. Shisui Uchiha came to dinner on a Thursday. Naruto didn't know who he was at first. Just another Uchiha, dark-haired and dark-eyed, with the high collar and the clan crest. But this one was different from the others Naruto had encountered in the compound. He was bright. That was the only word for it. He walked into the Uchiha main house like he carried his own light source, grinning at Mikoto, ruffling Sasuke's hair, and filling the room with an energy that made the perpetual tension of the household recede like shadows before a lamp. "You must be Naruto," Shisui said, turning that grin on him, and Naruto felt the disorienting warmth of someone being genuinely delighted to meet him. "Itachi told me about you, said you were stubborn as a mule and twice as loud. That sounds like a compliment coming from Itachi." "It absolutely is. He once called me acceptable company, and I'm his best friend." Shisui dropped onto the floor cushion beside Naruto, like they'd known each other for years. He moved with the fluid, easy grace of someone who was extremely dangerous and chose to be casual about it. "I hear Mikoto-san's been teaching you chakra control. How's that going? I can walk halfway up a tree. Not bad for a month's work. Took me about the same when I was your age." Shisui leaned back, arms behind his head. "The trick after halfway is trusting the chakra. Your brain panics when gravity should be pulling you down and isn't. You have to convince your survival instincts to shut up." "My survival instincts don't shut up." "Good, keep them loud. Just teach them the difference between real danger and imagined danger." Shisui's grin widened. "That's what being a shinobi is, really. Learning which fear to listen to and which to ignore." Dinner was the liveliest Naruto had experienced in the Uchiha house. Shisui talked enough for 3 people, told stories about missions that may or may not have been exaggerated, teased Itachi with the fearless ease of genuine friendship, and drew Sasuke out of his shell in a way that no one else seemed to manage. Even Itachi, silent, watchful, exhausted Itachi, relaxed a fraction in Shisui's presence. His shoulders dropped. The line between his brows smoothed. Once, when Shisui told a particularly absurd story about a mission involving a cat, a feudal lord's wig, and a catastrophic misunderstanding about explosive tags, Itachi actually smiled. A real one. Brief and small and gone before it fully formed, but real. Sasuke was practically vibrating. Shisui was one of the few people who could talk to Sasuke like a person rather than the clan head son or Itachi's little brother, and Sasuke responded to it like a plant responding to sunlight, turning toward it, opening up, becoming more himself. "Shisui-san, can you teach me the body flicker?" Sasuke asked, leaning forward across the table with the unguarded eagerness he only showed around people he trusted. "Teach you? Kid, you'd be a blur. With your chakra control, you'd pick it up in a week." Shisui winked. "Tell you what, after this whole mess settles down, I'll show you, deal?" "Deal." After this whole mess settles down, The words landed differently for everyone at the table. Sasuke heard a casual reference to vague grown-up stuff. Naruto heard a man talking about the plan he was about to execute. Mikoto heard a promise that might not be kept. And Itachi heard his best friend's optimism, and his face tightened almost imperceptibly. After dinner, Shisui and Itachi disappeared into the back of the house. Naruto helped Mikoto with the dishes while Sasuke practiced hand seals in the living room. Shisui's. Naruto searched for the word. Extraordinary, Mikoto supplied. Yes, he is. She rinsed a plate and handed it to him. Her hands were steady, but the tendons in her wrists were taut. He's the best of us, Naruto-kun. If anyone represents what the Uchiha could be, what we should be, it's him. The way she said it, present tense with a current of fear underneath, he's the best of us, made Naruto's throat constrict. He'll be okay, Naruto said, because he needed it to be true. Mikoto didn't answer. She washed the next plate, and the water ran clear and steady over her hands. 3 days later, Naruto felt the compound change. He arrived at the usual time, late afternoon, the sun slanting long and golden through the streets, and the gate guard looked at him differently. Not the casual dismissal he'd gotten used to, something harder, sharper. The guard's hand rested on the hilt of his weapon, and his Sharingan was active, 2 tamo spinning lazily in each eye, scanning Naruto with the bloodline's impossible perceptiveness. State your business. I come here every day. Mikoto-san invited me. You've seen me like 20 times. The guard held his gaze for 3 beats too long, then stepped aside without a word. The compound streets were quieter than usual, and the quiet was wrong. Not peaceful, tense, coiled. The few people Naruto passed moved with purpose, heads down, conversations non-existent. A pair of military police officers stood at the intersection near the main hall, and their posture was combat-ready. Something had happened. Something bad. He reached the Uchiha main house and found the front door closed, which it never was during the day. He knocked, and there was a pause, longer than normal, before it opened. Mikoto looked like she hadn't slept. Her hair was pulled back, but strands had escaped, framing a face that was pale and tight and held together by visible effort. Her eyes were dry, which was somehow worse than if she'd been crying. Naruto-kun. She glanced past him at the street, checking both directions, then drew him inside and closed the door. Come in. The house was different. The warm, comfortable atmosphere that had settled over the past month was gone, replaced by something brittle and electric. Sasuke was nowhere visible. Itachi was nowhere visible. Mikoto led him to the kitchen, sat him at the counter, and poured tea with hands that trembled on the third pour. She set the cup down in front of him and stood on the other side of the counter, gripping its edge. Shisui is dead, she said. The words didn't register immediately. Naruto heard them, understood their grammatical meaning, but his brain refused to connect them to the grinning, luminous person who'd ruffled his hair 3 days ago and promised to teach Sasuke the body flicker. Shisui, dead. What? It came out hoarse. His body was found in the Naka River this morning. The official report is suicide. Mikoto's voice was flat, recitative, like she was reading from a document. The unofficial truth is that he was ambushed by Danzo. Danzo, the elder, the council member, Danzo Shimura, head of Root. The man who's been working to ensure that no peaceful resolution to the Uchiha crisis ever succeeds. Mikoto's knuckles were white on the counter edge. He took Shisui's eye, one of them, the one containing the Kato Matsu Kami. Naruto's mind was spinning, grasping for purchase. But Shisui's plan, the technique that was supposed to, gone. The word fell like a stone into water. Shisui gave his remaining eye to Itachi before he died, entrusted it to him, then he chose the river over letting Danzo take the second one. She paused, and for the first time, her control fractured, a single crack in the dam, quickly sealed. He chose to die rather than let his power be used by the man who destroyed the only chance for peace. Naruto sat with his tea cooling in front of him, untouched, and felt the fragile thing in his chest, the hope that had bloomed after the overheard conversation, wither and go dark. Itachi, he said. Where's Itachi? I don't know. The admission cost her something visible. He hasn't come home since last night. He's not answering his summons. The clan elders are meeting. They think the village killed Shisui, that it's proof the village sees us as enemies, that the coup must happen now before. She stopped herself. Took a breath. Another. The elders are calling for blood, Naruto. Shisui's death was the spark, and the fuse is burning. What about the Hokage? The information you've been sending him, can't he? The Hokage is aware of the situation. I've sent everything I have through emergency channels. But the Hokage's response to every crisis is the same: deliberation, consensus building, patience. We don't have time for patience anymore. The kitchen was very quiet. Through the wall, Naruto could hear the distant sound of voices in the compound, raised, angry, the sound of a community tipping toward a precipice. Mikoto-san. Naruto's voice was steady in a way that surprised him. What do we do? She looked at him. Really looked, the way she had that first night in the alley, seeing him, all of him, the 12-year-old and the something more underneath. We keep going, she said. We find another way. Shisui gave everything to buy us a chance, and I will not waste it by giving up. How? I have documentation. Everything I've gathered over 2 years, meeting minutes, names, dates, troop movements, and more importantly, evidence of Danzo's interference. His root operatives surveilling our clan, his agents provoking incidents to accelerate the timeline, his theft of Shisui's eye. Her eyes hardened. If I can get this information to someone with the authority and the will to act, not just the Hokage, but the Fire Daimyo, the Jonin commander, anyone with enough power to remove Danzo and force a genuine negotiation, we still have a chance. Then let's do that. Let's get it to them. It's not that simple. The compound is going to lockdown. After today, no one enters or leaves without scrutiny. The elders are already looking for the leak. They know someone's been feeding information to the village. If they find me... She didn't finish. What about your Anbu contact, the one from the alley? Compromised. The emergency channel is down. Danzo's route is intercepting. She caught herself, took a measured breath. The channels are closed, Naruto-kun. I have the information, but no way to move it. Naruto's brain was working faster than it ever had, fueled by fear and adrenaline and the fierce, desperate need to do something. I can move it. No, I'm not Uchiha. I can walk in and out of this compound. Nobody watches me. I'm just the annoying kid who hangs out with Sasuke. Give me the documentation and I'll take it to the Hokage myself. You're 12 years old. You can't walk into the Hokage's office and hand him classified intelligence about a coup d'etat. The Hokage knows me. He gives me a monthly stipend and takes me out for ramen. I can get to him. And if Danzo's people intercept you, if Root identifies what you're carrying... Mikoto's voice sharpened. This isn't a training exercise, Naruto. People die for this kind of information. Shisui died for less. Then we make sure I don't get caught. They stared at each other across the kitchen counter. The tea between them had gone completely cold. I'm not going to sit here and do nothing, Naruto said. I'm not going to watch this fall apart when I can help. You told me once that someone should have helped me a long time ago and nobody did. Well, someone should be helping you and nobody is. So let me. Mikoto's eyes glistened. She blinked it away with the ruthless efficiency of a woman who hadn't allowed herself the luxury of tears in years. You sound like your mother, she said softly. She never took no for an answer either. Is that a yes? It's a let me think, which is as close to yes as you're going to get right now. She straightened, rolled her shoulders back, and the vulnerable woman disappeared behind the composed exterior of the clan head's wife. For the moment, nothing changes. You come here, you train, you have dinner, you go home. Everything normal. I need to make contact with Itachi and assess what options we have left. Can you do that? Can you be patient? Patience. The one thing that didn't come naturally. But Naruto looked at Mikoto's face, the strain, the grief, the iron while holding it all together, and nodded. I can be patient. Good, and Naruto? Yeah. Be careful going home tonight. Vary your route. Watch for shadows that don't move. Root. She meant root. Naruto thought of the too-still shadow in the training ground, the prickling sensation of surveillance, and felt cold despite the summer heat. I will. He left the compound as the sun was setting. the sky a bruise of purple and orange over the rooftops. The gate guard watched him go without expression. The streets of the village proper were normal, civilians heading home, shops closing up, the smell of cooking food drifting from apartment windows. Normal life, continuing in blissful ignorance of the catastrophe coiling just a few blocks east. Naruto walked home the long way, through the market district and up the hill behind the academy, doubling back twice and cutting through an alley he'd never used before. He didn't see any shadows that were too still. He didn't feel the prickle of surveillance, but he didn't feel safe either. In his apartment, he locked the door, sat on his bed, and pressed his hands together in the chakra-gathering position Mikoto had taught him. Not for any exercise. Just to feel the energy, the vast, churning warmth that was his and his alone, the power that no one had taught him to use and everyone had feared and Mikoto had looked at and said this is a gift, not a curse. He held it for 60 seconds. The leaf exercise without the leaf. Then he lay back and stared at the ceiling, 47 cracks. He counted them again, one by one, because the repetition was grounding and the night was long and sleep, as usual, wasn't coming. Somewhere in the village, Itachi was carrying a dead man's eye and a burden no human being should bear. Somewhere in the Uchiha compound, Mikoto was compiling evidence that could save her clan or condemn her. Somewhere in a hidden office, Danzo was calculating his next move with the cold precision of a man who'd already decided what the outcome would be. And Naruto lay on his bed in his crappy apartment and counted the cracks in his ceiling and waited for morning. Because morning meant he could move. And moving meant he could do something. And doing something was the only alternative to the fear that was trying to swallow him whole. 47 cracks. He was sure of it now. Chapter 4. Falling petals, the compound went to lockdown on a Saturday. Naruto knew because he showed up at the usual time and the gate was closed. Not just closed barred, with 2 military police flanking it instead of the usual lone guard. Both had their Sharingan active, the Tamo spinning in slow, deliberate rotations, and both wore expressions that made it clear the days of waving the blonde kid through with a dismissive nod were over. Compound is restricted, the one on the left said. He was tall, broad, with a scar across his jaw. In Nabai, Naruto thought, he'd seen him at a distance before. No outsiders. I'm not an outsider, I'm here to see Sasuke. Mikoto-san, no outsiders. Inabai's hand moved to the weapon at his hip, not drawing it, just touching it. Making sure Naruto noticed. Leave. Naruto stood there for a 5 count, calculating the odds of talking his way in verses making things worse. The math wasn't complicated. He turned and walked away, feeling Inabai's Sharingan on his back like a sunburn. He circled the compound once, keeping to the civilian streets that bordered the outer wall. The wall was 12 feet of dressed stone, topped with tile. He'd scaled bigger trees in training. The problem wasn't the height, it was what might be waiting on the other side. If the Uchiha had gone to full lockdown, they'd have patrols. Sensors, maybe. Definitely people with eyes that could track a gnat at 100 meters. He kept walking. The afternoon heat was thick, the streets quiet. The civilian neighborhood around the compound had always been sparse, and the tension leaking through the walls seemed to have driven even the holdouts indoors. Naruto was alone on the street, conspicuous in the emptiness. Then he felt it. Not the prickle of root surveillance, he'd learned that particular flavor of being watched, cold and clinical. This was different, familiar, warm. He stopped at the corner where the wall bent south, near a drainage grate set into the base of the stone. The grate was rusted, decorative, the kind of thing you walked past 1,000 times without noticing. But something was wedged behind the lower slat, a slip of paper, folded small, tucked against the stone where it wouldn't be visible unless you were looking from exactly the right angle. Naruto crouched, pretended to adjust his sandal, and palmed the paper in one motion. Mikoto had been teaching him misdirection for 2 weeks. He wasn't great at it, but he was adequate, and adequate was enough when no one was looking. He didn't read the note until he was 3 blocks away, in the shadow of a closed tea shop, with his back to the wall and clear sightlines in every direction. The handwriting was small and precise. Third training ground. Sunrise tomorrow. Come alone. Burn this. No signature. He didn't need one. He held the paper between two fingers, channeled a thread of chakra into it. The thinnest thread, the kind Mikoto had drilled into him until it was reflexive, and the paper ignited, burned, and crumbled to ash in under 2 seconds. He brushed the ash off his fingers and started walking home. He was at training ground 3 before the sky had fully committed to daylight. The clearing was damp with pre-dawn dew, the grass dark and heavy, the air carrying that particular earthy sweetness that only existed in the half-hour before sunrise. Naruto sat on a stump at the clearing's edge, legs bouncing with nervous energy, scanning the tree line every few seconds. She came from the east, where the shadows were thickest. No sound, no chakra flare. She was just suddenly there, stepping out of the tree line in civilian clothes, dark pants, a gray long-sleeved shirt, hair tied back tight. No Uchiha crest anywhere on her. She looked like any other woman out for an early walk, which was exactly the point. You got my note. Mikoto crossed the clearing and sat on a fallen log across from him. Up close, the damage of the past few days was visible, the hollows under her eyes had deepened, and a tension lived in her jaw that hadn't been there before, but her eyes were clear and hard and focused. What's happening in there? Naruto asked. What I feared. The elders have declared a state of emergency. Fugaku has been pushed into accepting an accelerated timeline. The coup is being planned for the night of the autumn festival. 10 days from now. 10 days. The festival draws Anbu and security forces to the village center for crowd control. The Uchiha military police would be deployed as part of normal operations, giving our forces legitimate positions throughout the village. At a coordinated signal, they move on key targets, the Hawkage Tower, the Anbu headquarters, the communications center. Simultaneously, a strike team enters the Hawkage's residence. Mikoto recited it like a briefing, clinical and precise. It's a competent plan. My husband is not a fool. But it relies on surprise and speed, and once the element of surprise is gone, the village's superior numbers and resources will crush them within hours. Can't you talk to Fugaku? Just tell him, I've tried. The 2 words carried an ocean of exhaustion. I've tried everything short of revealing my intelligence work, and I can't do that without being executed as a traitor. Fugaku is beyond persuasion. He sees the coup as the only path that preserves the clan's dignity. He believes, truly believes, that a successful strike will force the village to negotiate from a position of weakness, that the other clans will remain neutral, that the daimyo will accept a new power structure. She paused. He's wrong about all of it, but belief doesn't require accuracy. Naruto's hands were fists on his knees. So what do we do? I've completed the documentation package. Everything, the coup plans, the evidence of Danzo's interference, Shisui's murder, Root's operations against the clan. It's comprehensive enough to give the Hawkage grounds for emergency action against Danzo and a basis for forced negotiation with the Uchiha leadership. You want me to carry it? I need you to carry it, tonight. The weight of that landed on his shoulders and he let it. Okay. Don't say okay like I just asked you to pick up groceries. This is, I know what it is. He met her eyes. I said okay and I mean okay, tell me the plan. Mikoto studied him for a long moment. Whatever she was looking for, she seemed to find it. She reached into her shirt and produced a scroll, small, tightly wound, sealed with a wax stamp he didn't recognize. This scroll is sealed with a blood cipher. It can only be opened by someone I've keyed into the seal myself, Itachi, and as of this morning, you... She held it out. I added your blood signature from a bandage you left after training. Don't give me that look. Intelligence work requires pragmatism. Naruto took the scroll. It was lighter than he expected. The fate of an entire clan compressed into something that fit in his palm. The Hawkage's office. Mikoto continued. Not his home. Not through official channels. You go to the tower, you get inside, and you put this directly into Sarutobai's hands. No intermediaries, no secretaries, no Anbu guards. He'll be guarded. He's always guarded. But the Hawkage has a soft spot for you, you know this. Use it. Get to him however you can. Cry, yell, cause a scene, be the loudest, most obnoxious version of yourself. Everyone in that building already expects it from you. They'll be annoyed, not alarmed. Despite everything, Naruto almost laughed. You want me to be annoying on purpose. I want you to be yourself, which I say with genuine affection is inherently disruptive. The ghost of a smile crossed her face and vanished. Once you're in front of the Hokage, give him the scroll and tell him, "The autumn wind is early this year," those exact words. It's the code phrase I've used with his office. He'll know the scroll is from me and he'll know to open it immediately. "The autumn wind is early this year," Naruto repeated. "Good. There's one more thing." Mikoto leaned forward. "Danzo has root operatives throughout the village. I don't know their positions or their faces. That's the point of root. They're ghosts. But they will be watching the more actions write the next chapter now." Chapter 5. The longest night the sun set like a wound closing. Naruto watched it from his apartment window, the sky going from copper to rust to the deep, bruised violet that preceded full dark, and felt time compressing around him. Every minute that passed was a minute subtracted from something, though the exact sum remained unclear. 10 days until the coup, Mikoto had said. But 10 days was a number that could change. Timelines moved up. Surprises happened. Shisui was proof of that. The scroll sat in the bottom of his weapons pouch, wrapped in a spare shirt, nested between two practice kunai. Not the most sophisticated hiding spot, but Mikoto had been specific about this. Don't seal it, don't bury it, don't put it somewhere clever. Clever attracted attention. A kid carrying a weapons pouch was invisible. A kid carrying a sealed container was a question. He'd memorized the plan during their dawn meeting, walking through it 3 times until Mikoto was satisfied he had every step locked. Leave his apartment at full dark. Take the western route through the market district, longer than the direct path but busier, with more civilians and more cover. Enter the administrative sector via the alley behind the records building. Cross the courtyard to the Hokage Tower's east entrance, which was staffed by a single chunin after hours instead of the full Anbu detail at the main doors. Get inside. Get upstairs. Get to the Hokage, simple, clean. The kind of plan that looked easy on paper and became a living nightmare the moment human variables entered the equation. Mikoto had given him one additional instruction, delivered with the careful emphasis of someone who needed him to hear every syllable. If you are stopped by anyone, for any reason, you abort. You turn around, you go home, and you hide the scroll. Do not try to fight your way through. Do not try to talk your way past root. If they catch you with that scroll, they won't arrest you. They'll make you disappear. Danzo doesn't take prisoners, Naruto. He takes problems and makes them stop existing. She'd held his gaze after saying that, and he'd seen the cost of those words written in the lines of her face. The cost of sending a 12-year-old into danger because there was no one else. The knowledge that if something went wrong, his blood would be on her hands along with everything else she carried. "I'll be careful," he'd told her. "Be more than careful. Be smart." She'd paused, then added more softly, "And come back. Whatever happens, come back," he'd promised. It was an easy promise to make and potentially an impossible one to keep. But he'd made it anyway because she needed to hear it, and he needed to say it. Now he sat in his apartment as the last light died and waited for full dark and tried very hard not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. His apartment was small and familiar and suddenly, painfully precious. The water stain on the ceiling. The crooked shelf he'd installed himself at age 9 that held his collection of instant ramen cups. The window with the cracked pane that let in cold air in winter and mosquitoes in summer. The photo he didn't have of parents he'd never met. He wasn't afraid. That surprised him. He'd been afraid plenty of times in his life. Afraid of the dark as a small child, afraid of the villagers' stares, afraid of being alone forever. But right now, sitting on his bed in the gathering dark with a scroll in his weapons pouch and a mission that could save or damn an entire clan, he felt something else. Something that vibrated at a different frequency than fear. It took him a while to identify it. Purpose. For the first time in 12 years, Naruto Uzumaki had something to do that mattered. Not a prank, not a bid for attention, not a desperate performance for an audience that didn't care. Something real. Someone was counting on him. Multiple someones, Mikoto, Itachi, Sasuke, an entire clan of people who didn't know he existed or that a loud blonde kid held their future in a weapons pouch. The fear was there underneath. But the purpose sat on top of it like a lid, and the lid held. Full dark came. The village below his window became a constellation of lamplight and shadow, the streets emptying as civilians retired, and the night shift of shinobi took over the rooftops. Naruto pulled on his darkest clothes, black pants, a navy shirt Mikoto had given him 2 weeks ago that didn't have any orange on it, and tucked the weapons pouch against the small of his back, secured with a cloth tie. He checked his reflection in the bathroom mirror. A 12-year-old kid with messy blonde hair and blue eyes and 3 whisker marks on each cheek that had never been explained to him. Not exactly the picture of a covert operative. He turned off the lights, locked his door, and descended the exterior stairs into the night. The western route through the market district was exactly as Mikoto had described, busier than the direct path, populated with the specific ecosystem of Konoha's nightlife. Not the rowdy bar scene of the Jonin Quarter, but the quieter commerce of late-shift workers, restaurant staff heading home, couples walking along the lantern-lit canal. Naruto threaded through them with his head down and his hands in his pockets, matching the pace of the foot traffic, being nobody. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Not the walking, not the navigation, the being nobody. Naruto's entire existence was built around being noticed. Loud voice, orange clothes, outrageous behavior, all of it engineered, consciously or not, to force a world that wanted to ignore him into acknowledging that he was there. Turning that off, becoming small and quiet and unremarkable, went against every instinct he had. It felt like holding his breath underwater, but he did it. Because Mikoto had asked him to, and because the scroll against his back was more important than his comfort, he passed through the market district without incident. The lanterns threw warm pools of light across the canal, and the smell of grilled meat from a late-night yakitori stand made his stomach clench with something that was part hunger and part homesickness for a normalcy he'd never actually had. He kept walking. The administrative sector began where the market ended, separated by a stone bridge over the canal and a subtle shift in architecture. The buildings here were larger, more institutional, built to project authority rather than commerce. The Hokage Tower rose at the center, its curved roof silhouetted against the night sky, the kanji for fire illuminated on the facade. During the day, the area buzzed with shinobi, administrators, messenger hawks, and the general machinery of a hidden village's bureaucracy. At night, it was quieter, but never empty. The village's command structure didn't sleep. Naruto took the alley behind the records building, as planned. It was narrow and dark and smelled like old paper and dust. He moved through it quickly, emerging into the small courtyard that connected the records building to the east wing of the Hokage Tower. The courtyard was empty stone benches, a decorative tree, a single lantern burning near the east entrance. And one Chunin, sitting on a stool by the door, reading a magazine. Naruto recognized him. Kotsu Hagane, one of the eternal gate guards who also pulled night shifts at the tower. He was a decent guy, not warm, not cold, the kind of middle-ground personality that treated Naruto with mild exasperation rather than hostility. He was reading what appeared to be a weapons catalog and periodically yawning with the full-body commitment of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. This was the entry point. Mikoto had been clear, the east entrance one Chunin after hours. The main doors had Anbu. The roof had sensors. The east entrance had Kotsu and a magazine. Naruto took a breath, arranged his face into the expression he'd spent 12 years perfecting, wide-eyed, slightly frantic, entirely harmless, and walked into the courtyard. "Hey, Kotsu-san." Kotsu looked up from his magazine with the resigned expression of a man who'd heard that particular voice before and knew his evening had just gotten more complicated. Naruto, what are you doing here? It's past 10. I know, but I need to see the Hokage. It's really important. The Hokage is in a meeting. You can't just, please. It's about my stipend. The money didn't come this month and my rent is due and I don't have anyone else to ask and… He let his voice crack just a little. Not too much, Kotsu wasn't stupid, and overselling it would trigger suspicion. Just enough to activate the guilt response that most adults felt when confronted with an orphan in distress. Kotsu sighed. The magazine dropped to his lap. Naruto, I can't let you in. The Hokage schedule is 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. I'll go straight to his office and come straight back. You won't even know I was here. I'll absolutely know you were here because you're loud and the entire… Please. Naruto dropped the manic energy and let the real thing underneath show through, not the act, but the genuine desperation of a kid who needed something and had nowhere else to turn. It wasn't hard to access. It was always there. Kotsu looked at him for a long moment. Then he rubbed the bridge of his nose, muttered something about hazard pay, and jerked his thumb toward the door. 5 minutes, and if anyone asks, you snuck past me. I'm not explaining to the duty officer why I let a 12-year-old into the Hokage Tower at 10 at night. Thank you. 5 minutes, Naruto. He was through the door before Kotsu finished the sentence. The east wing of the Hokage Tower was a maze of corridors and offices, most of them dark and locked at this hour. Naruto had been in the building enough times, dragged in for reprimands after pranks, brought by the Hokage for occasional visits, to know the general layout. The Hokage's office was on the top floor, accessible by the main staircase or, if you were a shinobi, by simply running up the exterior wall. Naruto was not running up any walls tonight. He took the stairs, moving quickly but not running, his sandals quiet on the stone steps. 2nd floor. Offices. Dark 3rd floor, the mission assignment desk. Unmanned at this hour, the window shuttered. 4th floor. The Hokage's level. Here, the corridor was lit, warm lamplight spilling from under doors, the faint murmur of voices somewhere ahead. Naruto slowed. The Hokage's office was at the end of the hall, past 2 antechambers and a waiting area. During the day, you had to get through a secretary, a scheduling clerk, and at least 1 Anbu guard. At night, the clerical staff was gone, but the Anbu would still be there. He peered around the corner. The corridor stretched ahead, carpeted, lined with portraits of the 4 Hokages. At the far end, a single door, heavy, wooden, bearing the symbol of the Hokage's office. And in front of it, 1 Anbu operative in a cat mask, standing at parade rest 1 guard. That was lighter than expected. The meeting Kotsu had mentioned, if the Hokage was in a late-night meeting, some of the Anbu detail might have been redirected. Or it was a slow night. Or Naruto was about to find out the hard way that the other guards were simply better hidden. He couldn't bluff his way past Anbu. Kotsu was one thing, a chunin with a magazine and a lenient disposition. Anbu operatives didn't have lenient dispositions. They had protocols, and one of those protocols was do not let 12-year-olds into the Hokage's office during a late-night security meeting. Naruto pressed his back against the wall and thought he could cause a distraction. Throw something, make noise in another part of the building, draw the guard away. But Anbu were trained to hold position. A loud noise wouldn't pull a competent operative off their post. They'd signal for backup and investigate with shadow clones or a partner. He could try the window. The Hokage's office had large windows facing south, and Naruto could conceivably climb the exterior wall. But his tree walking was still imperfect, and a 4-story vertical surface at night with potential sensor arrays was a recipe for a very short, very fatal mission. He could wait. Sit in the corridor until the meeting ended and the Hokage emerged, then intercept him in the hallway. But that could be hours, and every minute Naruto spent in this building was a minute closer to someone finding him and asking questions he couldn't answer. Or he could do the thing that always worked. The thing that was simultaneously his greatest strength and the source of most of his problems. The thing his mother had apparently been famous for, he could be himself. Naruto stepped around the corner and walked straight down the corridor toward the Anbu guard. Didn't sneak. Didn't hesitate. Just walked, hands visible, face open, the picture of a kid who absolutely belonged here and was mildly offended that anyone might think otherwise. The Anbu mask turned toward him. The cat face was expressionless, they always were, but the body language shifted from rest to alert in a fraction of a second. One hand came up, palm out. This area is restricted. I know, I need to see the Hokage, it's urgent. The Hokage is unavailable, leave the building. I can't leave. I have something for him, something he needs to see right now. The Anbu head tilted. Behind the mask, eyes were assessing threat level, mental state, the probability that this was a genuine emergency versus a kid being a nuisance. Identify yourself. Use Uzumaki Naruto, the Hokage knows me. He'll want to see me. The Hokage is in a classified meeting and cannot be disturbed. You need to. The autumn wind is early this year. The words came out of Naruto's mouth with a clarity and conviction that surprised even him. He watched them land. The Anbu body language didn't change visibly. They were too well trained for that, but there was a pause. A beat of stillness that lasted exactly 1 second too long to be routine. Repeat that, the Anbu said. The autumn wind is early this year. Tell the Hokage, he'll know what it means. Another pause. The Anbu hand went to their ear, a communication seal, Naruto realized, some kind of short-range jutsu for contact with the security network. The operative murmured something too low to hear, waited, received a response. Then the Anbu stepped aside and opened the door. Enter. Directly to the office. Touch nothing. Naruto walked through the door on legs that felt like they were made of something other than bone and muscle, something lighter and less reliable, like hope or adrenaline or the particular brand of insane courage that came from having nothing to lose. The antechamber was small and formal. Another door ahead, this one slightly ajar, warm light spilling through the gap. Voices inside, multiple, the low murmur of men discussing things that shaped the world. Naruto pushed the door open and stepped into the Hokage's office. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat behind his desk in full robes, the Hokage's hat set aside, his pipe resting in an ashtray that was already full. He looked old. Not the benign, grandfatherly old that Naruto was used to, the real kind, the worn-down kind, the kind that came from decades of making decisions that killed people and calling it leadership. His eyes were heavy-lidded and tired and immediately, sharply alert when they focused on Naruto. He wasn't alone. 2 other men occupied chairs across from the desk. One Naruto recognized. Nara Shikaku, the Jonin commander, his scarred face wearing an expression of guarded calculation. The other was a man Naruto had seen but never met, a lean figure with bandages covering his right eye and his right arm, sitting with the absolute stillness of a predator at rest. Danzo Shimura. Naruto's blood went cold. The recognition was instant, physical, a full-body reaction that started in his gut and radiated outward like ice water through his veins. Danzo was here, in this room. Sitting 3 feet from the Hokage, participating in whatever meeting this was, positioned exactly where he could see and hear and influence everything. Mikoto's voice echoed in his head. Danzo doesn't take prisoners. He takes problems and makes them stop existing. For 1 terrible second, Naruto's resolve wavered. His hand twitched toward the weapon's pouch at his back, and every survival instinct he possessed screamed at him to turn and run and hide and never come back. But the Hokage was looking at him. And in the old man's eyes, Naruto saw something he hadn't expected, not surprise, not irritation, but recognition. The same kind Mikoto had shown that first night. The Hokage had heard the code phrase. He knew why Naruto was here. Naruto. The Hokage said, and his voice carried the careful weight of a man choosing his words for multiple audiences. This is unexpected. What brings you here at this hour? Multiple audiences. Danzo was listening. Shikaku was listening. Whatever Naruto said next had to make sense to all of them without revealing anything to the one person in the room who would kill him for it. "Old man," Naruto said, and his voice only shook a little. "I need to talk to you alone. It's about he scrambled for the cover story. "My stipend. It didn't come this month, and your stipend." The Hawkage's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. He understood. "I see. That is a matter for private discussion." He turned to the other two men. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me for a moment." Shikaku rose without objection, his expression unreadable. Danzo did not move. "Surely," Danzo said, "a child's financial concerns can wait until morning." His voice was smooth, measured, the kind of voice that sounded reasonable and felt like a blade being drawn. His single visible eye fixed on Naruto, and Naruto felt it like a physical weight, being assessed, being catalogued, being filed under a heading that would determine whether he continued to exist. "It will only take a moment," the Hawkage said. Pleasant, firm. The voice of a man who had been giving orders for decades and was not accustomed to repeating them. Danzo held the Hawkage's gaze for a beat, then rose with a fluid motion that belied his apparent age. "Of course," he said. "We can resume after." He walked past Naruto toward the door, and as he did, his single eye swept over the boy with a focus that felt like being read at the cellular level. Then he was gone, and Shikaku with him, and the door closed, and Naruto was alone with the third Hawkage. The silence lasted 2 seconds. Quickly, the Hawkage said, all pretense of the kindly old man evaporated. What remained was the god of shinobi, sharp, hard, operating at a level of intensity that Naruto had never seen from him before. "The code phrase, who gave it to you?" "Mikoto Uchiha." Naruto reached behind him, pulled the scroll from his weapon's pouch, and placed it on the desk. "She said to give you this directly, no intermediaries." The Hawkage picked up the scroll, examined the seal, and bit his thumb. A drop of blood on the wax, it glowed briefly, and the seal dissolved. He unrolled it. Naruto watched the Hawkage read, watched the lines of his face deepen, watched his eyes move down the scroll with increasing speed, then slow, then stop on something that made the color drain from his weathered face. "How long have you been involved in this?" The Hawkage asked without looking up. "About 6 weeks. I saw Mikoto-san meeting her Anbu contact and she, 6 weeks." The Hawkage's jaw tightened. "A 12-year-old boy has been sitting on intelligence about an active coup for 6 weeks, and no one in my administration noticed. She asked me not to tell anyone. She was right to." The Hawkage set the scroll down and looked at Naruto directly. The weight of that gaze was immense, not unkind, but immense, the full attention of a man who had led a village through 3 wars. "Naruto. This documentation, do you know what's in it?" "Some of it. The coup plan, the evidence against Danzo, Shisui's," he faltered on the name. "What happened to Shisui?" The Hawkage closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something had shifted, a decision made, a course set. "Danzo was in this room 5 minutes ago. Do you understand what that means? It means you can't trust your own people. It means the situation is more compromised than I allowed myself to believe." The Hawkage stood, crossed to the window, and looked out at the village below, the lights, the rooftops, the dark mass of the Uchiha compound to the east. "Mikoto-san's documentation includes evidence of Danzo's theft of Shisui Uchiha's eye, of root operations designed to sabotage diplomatic channels between my office and the Uchiha clan, of deliberate provocations intended to accelerate the coup timeline." He turned back. "If this evidence is genuine, and I have no reason to doubt it, then a member of my own council has been actively working to ensure that the Uchiha crisis ends in bloodshed." "Because he wants them gone," Naruto said. "That's what Mikoto-san thinks. He doesn't want peace. He wants the Uchiha eliminated." The Hawkage flinched. It was small, a tightening around the eyes, a fractional pull of the mouth, but Naruto saw it. The old man had known. Maybe not the specifics, maybe not the evidence, but he'd known, on some level, what Danzo was capable of. And he'd let it continue because confronting it was harder than containing it. "You know," Naruto said. His voice was quiet, and it wasn't an accusation. Not exactly, but it wasn't nothing either. You've known something was wrong and you didn't stop him. Naruto. Mikoto-san has been risking her life for 2 years giving you information, and you've been sitting in meetings with the guy who's trying to destroy her family. He heard his own voice rising and couldn't stop it. Shisui is dead. He was the best chance for a peaceful solution, and Danzo killed him, and you're having late-night meetings with Danzo like nothing happened. It is not that simple. Why not? The Hokage looked at him, and for the first time in Naruto's memory, the old man looked something other than wise or tired or kind. He looked ashamed. Because Danzo has been my friend for 50 years. Because his root forces are embedded in every layer of this village security, and removing him without proof would trigger a crisis as severe as the one I'm trying to prevent. Because, he stopped, took a breath, and when he continued, his voice was stripped of everything but honesty. Because I was afraid. I was afraid that confronting Danzo would force choices I wasn't prepared to make, and while I deliberated, people died. The admission hung in the air between them. The Hokage's office, with its scrolls and maps and portraits of dead leaders, felt smaller than it should have. Can you stop it? Naruto asked. The coup, can you still stop it? With this evidence, I can do what I should have done months ago. I can move against Danzo directly, strip his authority, disband Root, arrest his operatives. Without Danzo's interference, I can open genuine negotiations with the Uchiha leadership. Present Fugaku with proof that his clan has been deliberately provoked, that the village's aggression was not policy, but the work of a rogue actor. The Hokage picked up the scroll again, his grip tight. It doesn't guarantee success. Fugaku may be too committed to the coup to turn back, but it removes the one person who has been ensuring failure at every turn. Then do it. Tonight. It can't be tonight. Moving against Danzo requires coordination. The Jonin commander, the Anbu commander, trusted forces that I can verify are not root compromised. If I act hastily and Danzo gets warning, he'll disappear and his operatives will scatter and will have gained nothing. How long? Days. 3, perhaps 4, to assemble a force I can trust and execute a simultaneous operation against Root's known bases. We have 10 days until the coup. Then we have margin. Thin margin, but margin. The Hokage straightened, and the weight of command settled back onto his shoulders like an old coat. Naruto, I need you to return to Mikoto-san and tell her what I've told you. The evidence is received, I will act, but I need those days. I'll tell her. And Naruto. The Hokage rounded the desk and stood before him. Up close, the old man's eyes were wet. Thank you for carrying this, for coming here tonight, for being braver than an old man who should have known better. Naruto's throat tightened. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that matched the gravity of the moment. What came out was, "You owe me ramen, like a lot of ramen." The Hokage laughed, a real laugh, rough and warm and edged with something that might have been grief. More ramen than you can eat, I promise. You underestimate how much ramen I can eat. I absolutely do not. Go, be careful. Use the east exit, Kotsu will let you through. Naruto was at the door when the Hokage spoke again. Naruto, the man who was in this room when you arrived. Danzo, he saw your face. He heard the code phrase. He's going to investigate. Cold crept down Naruto's spine. I know. Stay away from isolated areas. Stay visible. If anyone approaches you, anyone you don't recognize, run. Don't fight. Run. I'm not good at running away. Learn. The Hokage's voice was iron. You are too important to lose. Do you understand me? Naruto nodded. He didn't trust his voice. He left the office, walked down the stairs on numb legs, passed through the east exit with a wave to Kotsu, and stepped into the night. The air hit him like a wall, warm, humid, thick with the smells of late summer. He stood in the courtyard and breathed and felt the adrenaline begin its long, shaking recession from his bloodstream. He'd done it. The scroll was delivered. The Hokage would act. The machinery of power was turning in a new direction, grinding slowly but turning, but Danzo had seen his face. And the Hokage had been afraid, which meant the situation was still desperate enough to frighten the most powerful shinobi in the village. Naruto started walking. Not home, Not yet. He needed to move, needed the physical rhythm of steps on pavement to process what had just happened. He took the long way through the market district, retracing his earlier path, letting the ambient life of the village surround him. A couple arguing affectionately outside a bar, a cat on a wall, watching him with luminous eyes. The distant sound of someone practicing a flute, melody drifting down from an upper window, normal life. Beautiful, fragile, unaware. He was passing through the canal district, half a mile from home when the shadow moved. Not the root shadow from the training ground that had been surveillance, static, observational. This was different. This moved with him. When he turned left, it turned left. When he crossed the bridge, it crossed behind him. Not matching his pace exactly, varying it, hanging back on straightaways, closing distance at turns. Professional, patient, close. Naruto's pulse spiked. His hands wanted to form seals, his body wanted to run, and he forced both impulses down with the chakra control Mikoto had hammered into him over 6 weeks of relentless practice. Panic was the enemy. Panic made you stupid. Panic made you predictable. He kept walking. Same pace, same posture. Adjusted his route, turned off the canal path and into a residential street that he knew connected to a busier road 2 blocks ahead. More people, more witnesses, less opportunity for a quiet disappearance. The shadow adjusted, closed the gap. 2 blocks became 1. Naruto reached the main road and turned onto it. A handful of civilians were still out, a couple walking a dog, an old man sweeping his shop front, 2 chunin heading somewhere with the purposeful stride of shinobi on duty. Naruto angled toward the chunin, not directly, not obviously, but drifting into their orbit with the calculated casualness of a kid who happened to be walking in the same direction. The shadow stopped. He felt it disengage, the pressure of pursuit lifting from his back like a hand being removed. He didn't look behind him. He kept walking, matching the chunin's pace from a safe distance, until he was within 2 blocks of his apartment. The chunin turned off. Naruto walked the last stretch alone, unlocked his door with hands that shook only slightly, entered his apartment, locked the door behind him, and sank to the floor with his back against it. His heart was hammering. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. The adrenaline that had carried him through the tower, through the meeting, through the streets, finally crested and broke, and he sat on his apartment floor in the dark and shook. Someone had followed him. Root, Danzo's people. They were watching him. They knew his face. They knew he'd been in the Hokage's office, and if they connected him to Mikoto's intelligence operation, they would make him stop existing. He pressed his palms against the floor and focused on the wood grain under his fingers, and breathed the way Mikoto had taught him: in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The shaking subsided slowly. His heartbeat retreated from his throat to his chest. He had to warn Mikoto. Tomorrow, at first light. She needed to know about Danzo being in the room, about the timeline, about the shadow that had followed him home. She needed all of it, but that was tomorrow. Right now, he was a 12-year-old sitting on his floor in the dark, and the night was very large and very quiet. And somewhere in the village, a man with one eye was thinking about him, turning the problem of Naruto Uzumaki over in his ancient, ruthless mind. Naruto got up, drank water from the tap, changed into sleep clothes, lay on his bed. Sleep didn't come. He hadn't expected it to. He lay in the dark and counted the cracks in the ceiling and thought about Mikoto's face when she'd said come back, and he made the promise again, silently, to the empty room. I'll come back. Dawn came and Naruto moved. He left his apartment before the sun cleared the eastern wall, taking a route he'd never used before, over the rooftops of the civilian quarter. Using the tree-walking technique on vertical surfaces that Mikoto hadn't officially taught him yet, but that his body had figured out through sheer repetition. He was clumsy at it, his feet sticking and releasing in uneven pulses, but it was fast, and it was above the sightline of anyone watching the streets. The drainage great. The dead drop point on the compound's south wall. He left a note in the same spot Mikoto had used, written in the simple shorthand she'd taught him, delivered. He'll act. 3 to 4 days. D was in the room, I was followed. Dawn meeting, same place tomorrow. He tucked the note behind the slat, adjusted it so it was invisible from the street, and moved on. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. If anyone was watching, they saw a kid crouching to tie his sandal by a wall. Nothing more. The rest of the day was an exercise in controlled normalcy. Naruto went to the training ground, a different one, the public fields near the academy where genin teams practiced, and where his presence was unremarkable. He ran drills. He practiced the leaf exercise, holding it now for a full minute with his eyes open and his body in motion, walking, turning, ducking imaginary strikes. The focus required was immense, but the skill was real and solid in his, and he clung to it like an anchor. At midday, he went to Ikaraku. Sat on his usual stool. Ordered his usual miso ramen, made his usual small talk with Chuchai and Iame, normal, visible, loud. Everything he was supposed to be. He was halfway through his second bowl when a voice said, "Naruto?" He turned. Sasuke was standing in the street outside Ikaraku, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. He was outside the compound, alone. "Sasuke, how did you get out? I thought the compound was locked down." "I left through the east drainage tunnel. Nobody uses it." Sasuke's jaw was tight. He wasn't looking at Naruto directly. His gaze kept drifting, scanning the street, the rooftops, with the unconscious vigilance of someone who'd grown up in a shinobi household. "I need to talk to you." Naruto set down his chopsticks. Chuchai, reading the room with the instinct of a man who'd served shinobi for 30 years, found somewhere else to be. Sasuke sat on the stool next to him. His hands were in his lap, fingers interlocked, knuckles pale. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled and vibrating with something underneath that Naruto recognized immediately: fear. Something's wrong in the compound. Really wrong. "The adults are all, they're not sleeping. They're meeting every night. My dad comes home and he looks like..." Sasuke stopped, started again. "There was an argument. Last night, my dad and my mom. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the tone and it was..." He pressed his lips together. "They never fight, never. My dad doesn't raise his voice. He raised his voice." Naruto sat very still. "And Itachi." Sasuke's voice cracked on the name, and he covered it with a cough. "Itachi came home at 3 in the morning. I was awake, I couldn't sleep, and I heard him in the hallway, and I looked, and he was just standing there in the dark. Standing in the hallway outside my room, just standing. And his face," Sasuke's hands tightened in his lap. "He looked like someone who was saying goodbye." The ramen in Naruto's stomach turned to lead. "Sasuke, don't tell me it's nothing. Don't tell me it's fine. Don't lie to me." Sasuke's eyes met his, and they were bright and hard and terrified. "You know something. You've known something for weeks. I'm asking you, not as a classmate, not as a rival. I'm asking you as," he struggled with the word, "as a friend. If that's what we are, tell me what's happening to my family." The noise of the street faded. The smell of ramen faded. There was only Sasuke's face, open and afraid, asking for a truth that would break him. Naruto thought about Mikoto, about the promise, about the scroll now in the Hokage's hands, about the 3 to 4 days of margin and the 10 days until the coup and the machinery of power turning in its slow, grinding way. "I can't tell you everything," Naruto said. "I made a promise to someone and I can't break it, but I can tell you this." He faced Sasuke straight on. "Your family is in trouble. Not the kind of trouble where someone's sick or someone's in debt. Big trouble. The kind that involves the whole clan and the village and people way above our level making decisions that affect everyone." Sasuke's face went pale. "A coup." Naruto's silence was answer enough. "I heard," Sasuke swallowed. "I heard my dad say the word once. I thought I'd misheard. I told myself I'd misheard." His voice was very small. "It's real. It's real. But people are working to stop it. Good people who love your family and want to keep everyone safe. My mom." Again, Naruto's silence. Sasuke closed his eyes. His hands were shaking. Naruto watched his friend, because that's what Sasuke was now, his friend, a word he'd never expected to attach to the proud, prickly boy sitting next to him, fight for composure and find it. The Uchiha mask settled into place, imperfect and cracking but functional. "What do I do?" Sasuke asked. "You go home, you be normal. You don't let anyone know we talked about this, and you trust that the people who are trying to fix this are going to fix it." Naruto heard the inadequacy of his own words and hated them. "I know that's not enough. I know you want to do something. But the best thing you can do right now is be safe and not give anyone a reason to think you know anything. That's the worst plan I've ever heard." "Yeah, it is, but it's what we've got." Sasuke sat there for a long time. The street moved around them, civilians walking, a cart rumbling past, a bird singing on a wire overhead. Normal life continuing. "If something happens," Sasuke said finally, "if it starts and everything goes sideways and the world ends, will you be there?" "I'll be there. Promise." "I promise." Sasuke nodded. He stood, put his hands in his pockets, and turned toward the compound. Then he stopped and said, without turning around, "You're the only person who's been honest with me. Everyone else, my dad, my brother, the whole clan, they look at me and decide I can't handle it. You looked at me and told me what you could. I wish I could tell you more. I know." Sasuke's shoulders were rigid, his back straight, his voice steady in the way of someone holding themselves together through pure will. "I'll see you later, Naruto." He walked away. Naruto watched him go until he turned the corner, a small, dark-haired figure disappearing into the afternoon crowd, carrying a truth he shouldn't have to carry at 12 years old. Naruto turned back to his ramen. It had gone cold. He ate it anyway, because wasting food was a sin, and because the act of eating was something to do with his hands and his mouth that wasn't screaming. The dawn meeting with Mikoto happened in the same clearing, same pre-dawn light, same dew-heavy grass. She looked worse. The sleeplessness had compounded, drawing her features sharp and tight, and she moved with a careful, conserving energy that suggested she was running on reserves that had reserves. But her eyes were the same dark, clear, burning with the controlled intensity that Naruto had come to think of as the Mikoto frequency. The signal that said, "I am holding, I am here, I am not done." "Danzo was in the room," she said flatly when he told her. Not a question. Sitting right across from the Hokage, like they were old friends. They are old friends, that's the problem. Mikoto paced the clearing in tight lines, her sandals leaving dark tracks in the wet grass. "Danzo saw your face. He heard the code phrase. He won't know exactly what it means, but he'll know its operational language and he'll investigate. If he connects you to me, he followed me. Last night, someone did root, I think. I lost them in the residential district." Mikoto stopped pacing. Her face went through a sequence of expressions, fear, anger, calculation, and settled on the last. "Describe exactly how they moved." Naruto did. The shadow, the pacing, the way it closed distance on turns and hung back on straightaways. Mikoto listened with the focused attention of a former Jonin processing tactical intelligence. Trailing pattern. Single operative. They weren't trying to take you, they were mapping your route. She resumed pacing, faster now. "That means they're in the information-gathering phase. They don't know what you are yet. They know you're a data point and they're determining your significance. How long before they figure it out? It depends on how thoroughly Danzo investigates and what resources he commits. If he considers you low priority, an orphan bothering the Hokage about his stipend, it could be days before they circle back to you. If he's suspicious enough to dedicate a full analysis team," she trailed off. "Hours. So we assume hours. We assume hours." Mikoto stopped in front of him. "Naruto, I need to tell you something and I need you to hear it clearly." "Okay. I've made a decision. If the Hokage's operation against Danzo succeeds, if Root is dismantled and genuine negotiations begin, then there's a chance. A real chance. But if it fails, or if the timeline collapses before the Hokage can act, then the coup happens. And if the coup happens, the village will respond, and the person they will send," she stopped. The word seemed to cost her something physical. "They'll send Itachi," Naruto said. Mikoto's eyes closed. "You overheard more than I thought." "I overheard enough. Itachi is the fail-safe. If everything else falls apart, Itachi is the one who—" He couldn't finish the sentence either. The order comes from Danzo, not the Hawkage would never sanction it. But Danzo has the authority under emergency protocols to order Anbu operations without Hawkage approval if he can demonstrate an imminent threat to village security. And a coup is the definition of an imminent threat. Mikoto's voice was brittle, precise, the voice of a woman dissecting her own worst nightmare with surgical detachment. Danzo's order to Itachi is, eliminate the Uchiha clan, all of it. In exchange, Sasuke's life is spared. The clearing was very quiet. A bird sang somewhere in the canopy, oblivious. Itachi won't do it, Naruto said. He can't. Itachi will do it. Because the alternative is a civil war that kills thousands and the certainty of Sasuke's death in the crossfire. And Itachi loves Sasuke more than he loves anything in this world, including himself. Mikoto's hands were at her sides, clenched into fists so tight the tendons stood out like cords. That's why we have to make sure it doesn't come to that. That's why the Hawkage's operation must succeed. That's why every hour matters. What about you? Naruto asked. His voice was barely a whisper. If the worst happens, if Itachi has to, what happens to you? Mikoto looked at him with eyes that held the answer. She didn't say it. She didn't need to. No, Naruto said. The word came out harder than anything he'd ever spoken. No, that's not. I won't let that happen. I will not let that happen. Naruto, you don't get to be calm about this. You don't get to stand there and accept it like it's already done. He was shaking, his whole body vibrating with a fury that had nowhere to go. You're the person who taught me to hold a leaf on my forehead. You told me about my mom. You sat me at your table and fed me dinner and called me by my name and treated me like I mattered. You don't get to die. This is not your burden. The hell it's not. You made it my burden the night you asked me to keep your secret instead of making me forget. You chose me, and I'm choosing you back. The clearing was silent except for Naruto's ragged breathing, and the singing of the bird, and the soft, relentless sound of the world continuing to turn. Mikoto stared at him. And something broke in her face, not the composed mask, not the spy's control, but something underneath, something old and defended and fragile. Her eyes filled, and she didn't blink them clear. She let the tears come, and they tracked silently down her cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. You extraordinary child, she whispered. I'm not extraordinary, I'm stubborn, there's a difference. There really isn't. She stepped forward and put her hands on his shoulders, firm, warm, the grip of a mother, which was the one thing in the world Naruto had never had and wanted more than anything. Listen to me. I am going to fight for my family with everything I have. I am not giving up. I am not accepting anything, but I need you to understand that if the worst happens, the very worst, my priority is Sasuke, and yours must be too. I already promised Itachi. I know, he told me. She squeezed his shoulders. Get to Sasuke, get him out. Whatever else happens, you get my son to safety. Can you do that? I can do that. Then we have a plan. An ugly, desperate, last resort plan that I intend to make sure we never need. She released his shoulders and wiped her face with the back of her hand, a quick, efficient motion. The spy was back. The mother was back. The woman who held everything together was holding it again. Now go. Stay visible, stay loud, be yourself. I'll make contact when I can. Naruto turned to leave the clearing. At the tree line, he looked back. Mikoto was standing where he'd left her, arms crossed, face composed, watching him go. Mikoto-san. Yes. The autumn wind might be early, but it hasn't come yet. She almost smiled. No, she said. It hasn't. He left the clearing and walked into the sunrise and felt the weight of the world on his 12-year-old shoulders and carried it, because there was no one else. And because someone had to. And because a woman who smelled like jasmine tea had once looked at him in a dark alley and decided he was worth trusting. The cracks in the ceiling would have to wait. He had work to do. Chapter 6. What remains 3 days passed like held breath. Naruto moved through them in a state of controlled hypervigilance that burned calories he didn't have and sharpened senses he hadn't known he possessed. He ate at Ikaraku, trained at public grounds, walked main streets, smiled at shopkeepers who didn't smile back, and perform the role of Konoha's loudest orphan with the dedication of a method actor whose life depended on the reviews. Which it did. The route surveillance didn't disappear. He felt it, intermittent, shifting, never the same operative twice. A figure reading a newspaper on a bench that hadn't been there yesterday. A vendor at the market whose eyes tracked Naruto a beat too long. A shadow on a rooftop that moved counter to the wind. They were still mapping him, still building their file, and Naruto let them build it because the file they were constructing was exactly the one he wanted them to have. 12-year-old nuisance, academy dead last, lonely kid who pestered the Hokage about his allowance. Nothing more. On the second day, he'd felt a presence close enough to touch. Someone in the crowd at the market, moving through the gaps between stalls, maintaining a distance of exactly 10 feet. Naruto had stopped at a fruit stand, picked up an apple, argued loudly with the vendor about the price, and used the commotion to scan behind him. Nothing. Whoever it was had dissolved back into the civilian traffic like smoke. That night, he'd lain in bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to calculate how many hours remained before the Hokage acted. 3 to 4 days, Sarutobi had said. It was now day 2. Tomorrow or the day after, the machinery was turning. It had to be turning. The alternative was unthinkable. He slept in fitful stretches, 20 minutes here, 40 there, and dreamed of dark alleys and spinning red eyes and a river that ran with something thicker than water. On the morning of the 3rd day, a hawk circled his apartment. Naruto spotted it from his window, a messenger hawk, the kind used by the Hokage's office for priority communications. It didn't land. It circled 3 times, dipped low enough for him to see the red band on its leg that indicated urgency, and then banked east toward the administrative district. Not delivering a message to him. Delivering a message to his area within visual range as a signal. Mikoto had mentioned this. A backup communication method for when dead drops were compromised. A hawk in the sky meant, come to me, but come where? The compound was locked down. The clearing was burned, they'd used it twice, and using any location more than twice was asking to be intercepted. He didn't have a new meeting point, then he remembered. Weeks ago, during one of their training sessions, Mikoto had been teaching him to read terrain and had described, almost offhandedly, a place she used to go as a genin. A footbridge over the Knocker River, south of the compound, where the water split around a boulder and created a pocket of calm behind the rapids. Kushina and I used to sit there after missions, she'd said. It was our place. No one else knew about it. A place connected to his mother. A place Mikoto would trust. A place no one else would think to look. Naruto moved. He took the rooftop route, faster, harder to follow. His tree-walking technique serving double duty on the vertical surfaces of Konoha's architecture. He was better at it now than he'd been even a week ago, his feet finding the adhesion point almost instantly, the chakra expenditure dropping from a flood to a steady stream. Progress, measured in the efficiency of footsteps on walls. The Knocker River bent south of the Uchiha compound, cutting through a stretch of old-growth forest that hadn't been developed because the terrain was too rocky and the floodplain too unpredictable. The footbridge was there, ancient, wooden, the kind of thing that looked decorative but had been built by engineers who understood load-bearing and water flow. Below it, the river split around a granite boulder the size of a house, creating a sheltered space on the downstream side where the current slowed and the noise of the rapids masked conversation. Mikoto was waiting on the boulder's lee side, sitting on a flat rock at the water's edge. She wasn't alone. Itachi stood behind her, arms crossed, Anbu gear stripped down to the black underlayer. He looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, his body held upright by something other than physical energy. Willpower, maybe, or the absence of any alternative. Naruto dropped from the bridge railing to the bank, landing in a crouch and crossed to them. The sound of the rapids wrapped around the 3 of them like a curtain, sealing them into a pocket of privacy. Tell me, Naruto said. Mikoto didn't waste words. The Hokage moved last night. Anbu operations against 3 root safe houses, simultaneous raids, coordinated with the Jonin commander. And 2 of the 3 were empty, cleaned out, files destroyed, personnel gone. Danzo was warned. The words hit Naruto like cold water. Someone tipped him off. Someone in the Hokage's inner circle. The operation was compromised before it launched. Mikoto's face was carved from something harder than flesh, stone, ice, the particular material that forms when hope is removed, and what remains has to bear weight anyway. The 3rd safe house yielded some intelligence, personnel records, mission logs, enough to confirm everything in my documentation. Not enough to locate Danzo or his remaining operatives. Where is he? Danzo? Gone. Underground. With enough root agents to constitute a significant threat, and Shisui's eye still in his possession. Mikoto looked at the river. The water split and reformed endlessly. The Hokage has issued a classified arrest warrant. Danzo is officially a fugitive. But a fugitive with his resources and his network is not a fugitive who stays caught. So the operation failed. The operation partially succeeded. Danzo is stripped of his council authority. Root is exposed. The Hokage has leverage he didn't have before. Mikoto paused. But the primary objective, neutralizing Danzo before the coup timeline expires, has failed. Yes. Naruto looked at Itachi. The older boy hadn't spoken. He stood like a statue, his dark eyes fixed on some middle distance that existed only in his own mind. What happens now? Naruto asked. Itachi spoke for the first time. His voice was flat and empty in a way that made Naruto's skin crawl, not because it was threatening, but because it was the voice of someone who had already made a decision that had killed the part of them capable of feeling. The Hokage has requested an emergency meeting with my father. Tonight, in the compound. He intends to present the evidence of Danzo's interference and propose an immediate ceasefire and negotiation framework. That's good. My father won't accept it. The words fell into the space between them and lay there. You don't know that, Naruto said. I know my father. Itachi's gaze shifted to Naruto, and the emptiness in it was vast. He's been told for 12 years that the village hates his clan. He's been surveilled, marginalized, humiliated. Now he's being told that one man was responsible for much of it, one man who is conveniently absent, untouchable, a ghost. My father will see it as a trick, another manipulation. He'll believe the Hokage is offering Danzo as a scapegoat to delay the coup while the village repositions its forces. But it's the truth. The truth is irrelevant when trust has been destroyed. Itachi's voice cracked, just barely on the last word. I know my father, Naruto. I've watched him for years. I've watched the suspicion eat him from the inside. I've watched every gesture of goodwill get reinterpreted as strategy, every offer of peace get analyzed for the trap underneath. He's not irrational, he's conditioned. 12 years of being treated like the enemy has made him into one. Mikoto's hand found Itachi's arm. She didn't speak. Just touched him, an anchor. What about you? Naruto asked. What about Danzo's order? If the coup still happens, Danzo is a fugitive. His authority to issue Anbu orders has been revoked. Itachi's jaw tightened. But revoked authority doesn't erase the operational logic. If the coup launches, the village will respond, the Hokage will have no choice, and the response will be overwhelming. Yes. The river churned around the boulder, white and relentless. Naruto stood on the bank and felt the spray on his face and looked at these 2 people, a mother and her son, both of them hollowed out by a crisis neither of them had created, and both of them were trying to stop, and something in him solidified. Not a thought, not a plan. Something deeper, in the bedrock beneath thought, in the place where the things that defined you lived. He was not going to let this end in blood. The meeting tonight, Naruto said. The Hokage and Fugaku, where? The main hall, in the compound. Mikoto looked at him. Why? Because you're right that Fugaku won't trust the Hokage. He's heard too many words from too many officials for too many years. Another meeting, another set of promises, it's just noise to him. Naruto's mind was moving fast, pulling threads together in a way that felt less like strategy and more like instinct. But he trusts you. Underneath everything, the arguments, the disagreements, the politics, he trusts you. You're his wife. You're the mother of his children. And if he's going to believe anyone, it's going to be you. Mikoto's face shifted. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you stop being a spy and start being his wife. Go to the meeting. Not hidden, not feeding intelligence through back channels. Go. Stand next to the Hokage and tell Fugaku the truth. All of it. What you've been doing, why you've been doing it, what Danzo has done. Tell him you betrayed the clan's trust because you loved your family more than your clan's pride. Tell him he's been manipulated into a war he can't win by a man who wanted his family dead. The silence that followed was different from the others. It had a quality of vertigo, the dizzying sensation of standing at the edge of something with no way back. If I do that, Mikoto said slowly, I'm confessing to treason against the clan, in front of the clan head, in front of the elders. The punishment for betraying the clan is death. I know. Naruto held her gaze. But you taught me something over the past 6 weeks. You taught me that being brave isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing the thing anyway because the alternative is worse. I taught you how to stick a leaf to your forehead. You taught me a lot more than that, and you know it. Mikoto stared at him. Then she looked at Itachi, who was looking at Naruto with an expression that had migrated, slowly and painfully, from emptiness to something that resembled wonder. He's right, Itachi said. His voice was rough, stripped of its clinical detachment, sounding for the first time like a 13-year-old boy who wanted desperately for his mother to save his family. Mother, father loves you. He's angry and he's desperate and he's been conditioned to see enemies everywhere, but he loves you. If you stand in front of him and tell him the truth, not intelligence, not analysis, the truth from his wife, he might hear it. And if he doesn't, then we're no worse off than we already are. The coup is 7 days away. The Hokage's operation against Danzo has failed. Every other option has been exhausted. Itachi's hands dropped to his sides. This is the last door, Mother. You're the only one who can open it. Mikoto looked at the river. The water split around the boulder, churned white through the rapids, and reformed downstream into a single flowing body. Split and reform. Split and reform. Kushina would have done it, Mikoto said quietly. She wouldn't have hesitated. She would have kicked the door open and started yelling. Maybe, Naruto said, but you're not my mom, you're you, and you'll do it your way. Mikoto closed her eyes. For 10 seconds, Naruto counted the way she'd taught him, in for 4, hold for 4, out. She was perfectly still. The river roared. The morning light strengthened. A hawk cried somewhere above the canopy, circling, then she opened her eyes. Tonight, she said. I'll need access to the hall before the meeting. Itachi, can you arrange for the elders to be present? Not just Fugaku, Tekka, Yashiro, Inabai, the full leadership council. If I'm going to do this, I do it once in front of everyone. I can arrange it, and Naruto. She turned to him. You will not be at this meeting. What? No, listen to me. This meeting will either save my clan or destroy it. Either way, it will be dangerous, emotions will be high, accusations will fly, and if things go badly, the compound will become a combat zone within minutes. You cannot be there. Mikoto-san, you will be outside the compound, near the east gate, with a clear path to Sasuke's location. Her eyes were steady, dry, absolute. This is the plan within the plan, Naruto, the thing we hope we never need. If the meeting fails, if the compound goes dark, you get Sasuke and you run. That is your mission, the only mission that matters. He wanted to argue. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to argue, to insist on being there, to refuse to stand outside while the woman who'd changed his life walked into a room full of people who might kill her for telling the truth. But he looked at her face, and he saw the same thing he'd seen the first night in the alley, a mother making an impossible choice to protect the people she loved. And he understood, with a clarity that felt like grief, that his role in this story was not to save Mikoto. His role was to save what Mikoto was fighting for. I'll be at the east gate, he said. Good. But Mikoto-san? Yes. You'd better come out of that meeting alive, because you still owe me a water-walking lesson. Her face did something complicated and beautiful, a smile that was also a grimace that was also a prayer. "I'll add it to the list." Itachi stepped forward. He looked at Naruto with those dark, exhausted, ancient eyes, and for the first time since Naruto had known him, extended his hand. Not for a handshake. His fist, held out at chest height, Naruto bumped it. Itachi's knuckles were cold. "Whatever happens tonight," Itachi said, "you changed things, you know that." "I didn't change anything, I just delivered a scroll." "You were in the right place. You stayed when you could have run. You kept a promise you had no reason to keep." Itachi's fist dropped. "My mother was right about you. You're like Kushina. The shape of things changes when you're in the room." Naruto didn't trust his voice. He nodded once, sharply, and turned away before his eyes could betray him. He climbed the bank, reached the footbridge, and looked back one last time. Mikoto and Itachi stood together at the water's edge, mother and son, the river splitting and reforming around the boulder beside them. Mikoto's hand was on Itachi's shoulder. Itachi's head was bowed. The morning light caught them in profile, and they looked like figures from a painting, beautiful, tragic, suspended in a moment that was about to end. Naruto burned the image into his memory and walked away. The day was interminable. He tried to train and couldn't focus. He tried to eat and couldn't taste. He walked the village streets and saw none of it, the buildings, the people, the normal life flowing around him like a river around a stone. He was the stone. Everything else moved and he stayed still, waiting, trapped in the space between action and consequence. At 4 p.m, he went to the academy. Not for any logical reason, the building was closed for summer break, the grounds empty. But it was where he'd spent most of his life, and the familiarity of it was grounding. He sat on the swing outside the entrance, the one that hung from the old oak tree, and rocked back and forth with his feet dragging in the dirt. This was where he'd sat after every failed exam. This was where he'd watched the other kids get picked up by their parents, mothers smoothing hair, fathers lifting children onto shoulders, families forming and reforming in the schoolyard like constellations. This was where the loneliness lived, in this exact spot, on this exact swing, and Naruto had sat in it so many times that it had worn a groove in the earth and a matching one in his chest. But today, it felt different. The loneliness was still there, it would always be there, a tenant that had moved in too early and refused to leave, but it had company now. Alongside it, occupying the same space, were other things. The taste of Mikoto's cooking, the sound of Sasuke's grudging laughter. The weight of a leaf on his forehead, held in place by a thread of chakra so fine it was almost nothing, almost everything. The memory of Itachi's cold knuckles against his, and Shisui's warm grin, and Mikoto's voice saying she loved you, never doubt that. He was still alone on the swing. But he wasn't alone in the world. Not anymore. The sun tracked west. The shadows lengthened. Naruto watched the light change and thought about courage and what it actually meant, not the loud, flashy kind he'd always aspired to, the kind that got you noticed and applauded and written about. The quiet kind. Mikoto's kind. The kind that walked into a room full of people who might kill you, armed with nothing but the truth and the desperate hope that love was stronger than fear. At 6 o'clock, he moved. The east gate of the Uchiha compound was quieter than the main entrance, a smaller opening in the wall, used primarily by residents rather than visitors, staffed by a single guard during normal hours. Tonight, the guard was gone. The gate was closed but unbarred, which struck Naruto as odd until he realized the clan's attention was elsewhere. Everyone who mattered was in the main hall. The perimeter was an afterthought. Naruto positioned himself in the shadow of a building across the street, 50 feet from the gate. Close enough to reach it in seconds. Far enough to have options if things went sideways. The wait began. The compound wall was thick stone, and the main hall was deep inside the district, so Naruto couldn't hear what was happening. He could only watch the gate and the wall and the sky above them, and read the compound's mood through the only channels available. The quality of the silence, the absence or presence of movement, the indefinable feeling of a place under pressure. He checked his weapons pouch. 3 kunai, real ones, not practice blades. Mikoto had given them to him the previous week without comment, slipping them into his bag after a training session. He hadn't asked why. He hadn't needed to. 7 o'clock. The sky was going purple. Lights came on in the compound, visible over the wall, the warm glow of lanterns, domestic and ordinary. 7:30. Nothing. The silence was absolute. 8 o'clock. Naruto's legs were cramping from crouching. He shifted position, stretched, and settled again. His heart was a metronome set to allegro. 8:15. A sound from inside the compound, distant, muffled by the wall, but unmistakable. Raised voices. Multiple, overlapping, the sound of an argument reaching its peak. Naruto's hands went to his kunai pouch, not drawing, just touching, anchoring. The voices crescendoed, peaked, and then stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Cut off as if someone had closed a door, or more likely, as if someone had spoken with enough authority to silence a room. More silence. Longer this time. The kind of silence that had its own weight, its own texture, that pressed against the eardrums and made the world feel like it was holding its breath. Then, at 8:32, Naruto had been counting seconds, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. The way you count the gap between lightning and thunder, the east gate opened. Sasuke came through. He was walking fast, not running, his hands clenched at his sides, his face a mask of something that Naruto couldn't read from 50 feet. Behind him, the gate swung shut, and the compound was sealed again. Naruto stepped out of the shadows. Sasuke. Sasuke's head snapped toward him. His eyes were wide, glassy, the eyes of someone who'd just had the floor removed from under their life. He stared at Naruto for 3 beats without speaking. "What happened?" Naruto asked. Sasuke opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "My mom," he said. His voice was strange, thin, stretched, like it was coming from a long way away. "My mom just stood up in front of the whole clan and told them she's been spying for the Hokage." Naruto's stomach dropped through the earth. And my dad," Sasuke's voice broke. He caught it, held it, rebuilt it word by word. "My dad just stood there. He just stood there and looked at her like he'd never seen her before. And then Yashiro started yelling, and Inabai pulled a weapon, and Itachi stepped between them, and... Is she okay? Sasuke, is your mother okay?" The Hokage was there, in the hall. With Anbu, real Anbu, not Root. He had the evidence, the documents, everything. He showed them what Danzo did. The surveillance. The provocations. Shisui's eye. Sasuke's breathing was ragged. He told them the whole thing, the whole 12 years of it. How they were pushed into the compound, how the distrust was manufactured, how Danzo wanted them dead and used everyone, my dad, the elders, the whole clan, as pawns. What did Fugaku say? Sasuke's face crumpled. Not dramatically, not with tears, it crumpled inward, the way a building crumples when the foundation gives, structural and total. He cried. The word hung in the air, my dad, Sasuke whispered. My dad who never shows anything, who never raises his voice. Who wears his face like armor every single day. He stood in front of the whole clan and he cried. Sasuke pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. He went to my mom and he held her and he cried and he said he was sorry, in front of everyone, the clan head, saying sorry. Naruto felt something vast and trembling rise in his chest, not relief, not yet, something too raw and enormous for a single word. The coup, my dad told the elders to stand down. Yashiro argued. Tekka backed Yashiro, but my dad. Sasuke dropped his hands from his eyes. They were red but dry. My dad said, my wife risked her life to save us from ourselves. If we move forward after this, we deserve what comes. And then he looked at the Hokage and he said he was willing to negotiate. Real negotiations. No conditions. And the elders accepted? Some of them. Yashiro and Inabai walked out. But Tekka wavered, and when Tekka wavered, his faction followed. The vote was, my mom called it a clear majority, enough to kill the coup. Naruto sat down. Not intentionally, his legs simply stopped working, and gravity did the rest. He sat on the street across from the Uchiha compound's east gate and put his hands on the ground and breathed. Is she okay? He asked again. Your mom, is she okay? Yeah, she's okay. She's still in the meeting. My dad told me to go outside because it's going to go late and there are details to work out and Sasuke stopped. She told me to find you. She said you'd be here. She's usually right about things. Yeah. Sasuke sat down next to him. Not gracefully, he just folded, dropping to the ground like a puppet with cut strings, and they sat side by side in the dirt with their backs against the building wall and the compound in front of them and the sky darkening overhead. They didn't speak for a while. The sounds of the village surrounded them, distant, warm, ordinary. Someone was cooking. Someone was laughing. A dog barked. The world continued in its relentless, beautiful mundanity. How long have you known? Sasuke asked. About 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Sasuke turned his head and looked at Naruto. His expression was too complex to decompose into individual emotions. There was anger in it, and hurt, and betrayal, and gratitude, and something deeper than all of them that Naruto recognized because he felt it too. The disorienting, ground-shifting experience of having your world rewritten while you were living in it. You carried this for 6 weeks and you didn't tell me. I promised your mom. I know, I'm not angry. A pause. I'm a little angry. That's fair. You could have told me. No. I couldn't. Sasuke considered this. The anger drained from his face, replaced by the exhaustion of a 12-year-old who just watched his family nearly tear itself apart and somehow hold together. No, he agreed. You couldn't. He looked at the compound wall. My mom is the bravest person I've ever known. Yeah, my dad cried, Naruto. My dad. People cry when they realize how close they came to losing everything. Do they? Naruto thought about all the times he'd stared at his ceiling and counted cracks because it was the only thing that kept the emptiness from swallowing him. Yeah, he said. They do. More silence. Then Sasuke said, What happens now? I don't know. Negotiations, I guess. Your clan and the village working out 12 years of garbage. It's not going to be quick. And Danzo, still out there, the Hokage's looking for him. Sasuke's jaw tightened. He killed Shisui. Yeah, and tried to destroy my family. Yeah, I'm going to find him someday. When I'm strong enough, and I'm going to. Let's worry about that later. Naruto bumped Sasuke's shoulder with his own. Right now, let's just sit here, they sat. The sky went from purple to black, and the stars came out, distant, cold, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath them. The compound gates stayed closed. The meeting inside continued, the future of the Uchiha clan being hammered out in a room full of angry, frightened, cautiously hopeful people who were choosing, for the first time in 12 years, to try something other than war. At 9:45, the gate opened again. Mikoto stepped through. She looked like she'd been through a war, which in a sense she had. Her hair had come loose from its tie, falling around her face in dark strands. Her eyes were puffy. There was a cut on her left hand, small, shallow, the kind you got when someone drew a blade near you and someone else knocked it aside. She stood in the gateway and scanned the street and found them, 2 boys sitting in the dirt against a building wall, looking up at her. She walked to them, knelt in the street, and gathered them both, Sasuke on one side, Naruto on the other, into an embrace that had the structural integrity of steel cables and the warmth of every good thing Naruto had ever felt compressed into a single moment. Sasuke made a choked sound against her shoulder. Naruto pressed his face into the fabric of her shirt and smelled jasmine tea and adrenaline and something else underneath. Something warm, alive, real. It's done, Mikoto said. The clan has agreed to a ceasefire and formal negotiations with the Hokage's office. Your father is meeting with Sarutobi now to establish terms. Mom, I know, sweetheart, I know. She held them tighter. I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. They stayed like that for a long time, the 3 of them kneeling in the street outside the compound, and Naruto thought, this is what it feels like. This is what everyone else has. This thing, this arms around you thing, this you're safe thing, he'd never had it before. He hadn't known the shape of it, hadn't known how it would fill the spaces in his chest that he'd assumed were permanent, load-bearing, structural vacancies. But it filled them completely. Mikoto released them eventually, sat back on her heels, and looked at them both with eyes that were red and exhausted and fierce with love. Both of you need to eat something and sleep, especially you. She pointed at Naruto. You've lost weight. I've been busy. Busy is not an excuse for skipping meals. Kushina would kill me if she saw how thin you are. She stood, brushed dirt from her knees, and held out her hands, one to each boy. Come inside, both of you, I'll cook. Mom, it's almost 10, Sasuke said. I'm aware of the time. I'm also aware that neither of you has eaten properly in days, and my kitchen doesn't close. Come. They took her hands and stood and walked through the east gate into the Uchiha compound, and the guard who'd returned to his post during the meeting looked at the three of them. The clan head's wife, the clan head's son, and the blonde kid who shouldn't have been there, and opened the gate without a word. The house was warm and lit and smelled like cedar, and the table was set for 4. Naruto stopped in the doorway of the dining room and stared at the place settings. 4, as always. But tonight, the 4th chair wasn't empty. Itachi sat at the table. He was still in his black underlayer, his hair loose, dark circles under his eyes carved so deep they looked permanent. But something in his face had changed. The emptiness was gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative thing that Naruto recognized after a moment as the specific expression of someone who had prepared themselves to die and then, unexpectedly, been given a reason to live. You look terrible. Naruto told him. You look worse, Itachi said, and smiled. It was a real smile, small, exhausted, lopsided, but real. Sasuke saw it and froze in the doorway, staring at his brother with the wide eyes of someone witnessing a solar eclipse. Niai-san, are you smiling? Don't get used to it. I'm getting used to it. This is historic. I'm documenting this. Naruto, are you seeing this? I'm seeing it. Somebody check for Genjutsu. Both of you sit down before I stop, Itachi said, and the smile widened a fraction before he wrestled it back under control. They sat. Mikoto disappeared into the kitchen, and the sounds that emerged were the ancient, mundane, sacred sounds of a mother cooking, the hiss of oil, the chop of a knife, the low clatter of pot lids. Naruto sat at the table across from Itachi, with Sasuke beside him, and felt the evening settle around them like a blanket. The negotiations, Naruto said quietly, while Sasuke was distracted by something on the shelf behind him. Are they going to work? Itachi considered this. They're going to be difficult. There's 12 years of damage to address, the surveillance, the relocation, the erosion of political power. The clan's grievances are legitimate, and they won't be resolved by a single meeting. He paused, but the alternative was annihilation. And now, for the first time, both sides have a reason to choose differently. And Danzo, the Hokage has mobilized tracker teams. Danzo's resources are diminished, his safe houses are compromised, his operatives are scattered, and his political cover is gone. He's dangerous, but he's cornered. Itachi's eyes hardened. He'll be found. And your dad, something moved across Itachi's face, complicated, layered, the emotional equivalent of tectonic plates shifting. My father asked to speak with me after the meeting, privately. He looked at his hands, resting flat on the table. He said he was proud of me. He said he'd been so focused on the clan's honor that he'd lost sight of what honor actually meant. A breath. He apologized. My father apologized to me for putting me in a position where I had to choose between my family and my village. Sounds like a good conversation. It was the first real conversation we've had in 3 years. Itachi's voice was very quiet. I'd forgotten what his voice sounded like when he wasn't performing, when he was just my father. Sasuke turned back to the table, having retrieved whatever he'd been looking at. A framed photo, Naruto realized. A family picture, Fugaku and Mikoto young with a tiny Itachi and a baby Sasuke. The colors were faded, the edges soft. Sasuke set it on the table between them. We took this at the summer festival, Sasuke said. I was like one, I obviously don't remember it, but Mom always said it was the happiest day of her life. He looked at the photo, then at Naruto. Maybe we can have another one, a happy day when all this is over. When this is over. Naruto agreed. I'm going to eat so much festival food you'll have to carry me home. I'm absolutely not carrying you. You'll carry me and you'll like it. In what universe? Mikoto emerged from the kitchen with a tray of onigiri, grilled fish, pickled vegetables, and a pot of soup that steamed and smelled like the distilled essence of comfort. She set it on the table, surveyed the three of them, Itachi with his fragile smile, Sasuke with the family photo, Naruto with his too-wide grin. And her face did the thing that Naruto had seen once before, in the garden. When she'd looked at Sasuke and the love had been so raw it was almost unbearable, this time it was directed at all three of them. "Eat," she said. "Everything. I don't want to see a single grain of rice left on any plate." They ate. The food was perfect, not in the restaurant sense, not gourmet or artful, but perfect in the way that food cooked by someone who loved you was always perfect. Naruto ate until his stomach hurt, and then ate more, because Mikoto kept refilling his plate and he didn't have it in him to refuse. Sasuke ate his weight in tomatoes. Itachi ate slowly, methodically, like someone relearning a skill they'd forgotten. Mikoto ate last, after everyone else was full, and even then she ate standing at the counter because that's who she was, the person who fed everyone else first. After dinner, Sasuke fell asleep on the living room floor. 1 minute, he was sitting cross-legged, arguing with Naruto about whose kunai technique was better. And the next, he was horizontal, breathing deep, and even the accumulated tension of weeks of ambient terror finally releasing its hold and dropping him into unconsciousness like a stone into water. Itachi covered him with a blanket and sat beside him, one hand resting on his brother's shoulder. Naruto helped Mikoto with the dishes. They stood side by side at the sink, washing and drying, and the routine of it, the warm water, the smooth ceramic, the quiet rhythm of hands working together, was the most peaceful thing Naruto had ever experienced. Mikoto-san. What you did tonight. Standing up in front of the whole clan, telling the truth, was terrifying. She handed him a bowl. Absolutely terrifying. My hands were shaking so badly I had to hold them behind my back. But you did it. I did it. She rinsed the last plate and turned off the water. Because a stubborn 12-year-old sat on a rock by the river and told me that being brave meant doing the thing even when you're afraid. She dried her hands and turned to face him. You gave me that, Naruto. In all my planning, all my intelligence work, all my careful, cautious, incremental strategy, I never once considered the simplest option, just telling the truth. I'm not smart enough for complicated options. Simple's all I've got. Simple is underrated. She leaned against the counter and looked at him with the full, unguarded warmth that he'd come to think of as hers, the Mikoto look, the one that said, I see you and you matter. I want to tell you something, about your mother. Okay. The night you were born, the night of the Nine-Tails attack, the village was in chaos. Evacuations, fires, people running, the fox rampaging through the eastern district. I was in the compound with Itachi, who was 4, trying to keep him safe. Fugaku was with the military police, directing response operations. And Kushina, Mikoto's voice softened. Kushina was fighting. She'd just given birth to you hours before and she was fighting, because that's who she was. She never once looked at a terrible situation and decided it was someone else's problem. Did you see her, that night? No, I didn't see her again after that night. I couldn't, Mikoto took a breath. I should have looked for you after. When I found out she and Minato were gone and you were alone, I should have come for you. I should have taken you in, raised you alongside my boys, given you the family you deserved. Her eyes were bright. I didn't, and I've carried that failure for 12 years. It's not a failure. You had your own. It is a failure. I was your mother's best friend, and I let her son grow up alone because I was afraid of what the village would think, afraid of the political implications, afraid of the attention it would bring to my family during a time when the Uchiha couldn't afford attention. She reached out and placed her hand on his cheek, and her palm was warm and slightly damp from the dishwater. I'm sorry, Naruto. I'm sorry it took a secret in an alley to bring us together when it should have happened the day you were born. Naruto's vision blurred. The kitchen swam. He blinked and the tears tracked down his face, hot and sudden, and he didn't wipe them away because for the first time in his life he was crying in front of someone who wouldn't look away, and it felt like the most honest thing he'd ever done. "You're here now," he said. "That's what matters." Mikoto pulled him into a hug. Not the group embrace from the street, this was just for him, her arms around his shoulders, his face against her collarbone, her chin resting on the top of his head. He fit. That was the thing that undid him completely. He fit, like there was a space in the world shaped like him and he'd finally found it. "You're here now," he said again, muffled against her shirt. "I'm here now," she agreed, "and I'm not going anywhere." Naruto left the Uchiha compound at midnight. Mikoto had offered to let him stay. The guest room was made up, she'd said, and it was late, but he needed to walk. Needed the night air and the quiet streets and the time to process the impossible, world-remaking thing that had happened. The village was asleep. Street lamps threw their pools of yellow light onto empty roads. Naruto walked through them one at a time, light to shadow to light, the same path he'd walked 6 weeks ago on a sleepless night that had led him to an alley and a woman and a secret that had changed everything. The Uchiha compound was behind him, lit from within, alive and whole. Not out of danger, the negotiations would be long and difficult, and the scars would take years to heal, and Danzo was still out there in the dark somewhere, nursing his grievances and his stolen eye. But alive, not a graveyard. Not a monument to failure and blood. A place where a woman had stood up and told the truth, and a man had listened, and a family had held together. Naruto walked home, climbed the stairs, unlocked his door, stood in his apartment in the dark, and looked at the room that had been the entirety of his world for 12 years. Small, bare, lonely, but temporary. That was the difference. For the first time, the apartment felt like a place he was passing through, not a place he was trapped in. There was a table in a house across the village with a place set for him. There was a woman who called him by his name. There were 2 boys who were his friends, one grudgingly, one quietly, and both of them were alive tonight because of choices made by imperfect people who loved imperfectly but loved anyway. He lay on his bed, looked at the ceiling. The cracks were still there. 47 of them. The river, the grandma, the spider web, the ones he'd never bothered to name. They hadn't changed. They wouldn't change. They were just cracks, damage that had been done to a surface a long time ago by forces that no longer existed, still visible, still present, but not getting worse. Not getting worse, that was enough. For now, tonight, that was enough. Naruto closed his eyes, and for the first time in 6 weeks he slept, not the fitful, fractured sleep of vigilance and fear. Real sleep. Deep, dreamless. The total surrender of a body that had been running on purpose and adrenaline for so long that it had forgotten what rest felt like. He slept through the night and into the morning, and when he woke, the sun was already high and the village was loud with the sounds of ordinary life, and his apartment was warm with light. He lay there for a moment, cataloging the aches and the relief and the strange, unfamiliar lightness in his chest. Then he got up, washed his face, put on clothes, the orange jacket, the one with the holes, because it was his and he loved it, and he was done being invisible, and opened his door. The day was bright, the street was busy. Somewhere across the village, in a compound behind gray walls, a family was eating breakfast together for the first time in months, and a mother was setting a table with places for the people she loved. And one of those places was for a loud, stubborn, orange-wearing kid who had wandered into an alley on a sleepless night and accidentally become the thread that held everything together. Naruto stepped into the sunlight and went to find them.